have been friends with my BFF Kayla since we were 11. She is awesome and has supported me through some really tough times, and I have been there for her through a lot of shit too. We have never fallen out, and we always supported each other. Until now. Kayla has been with her boyfriend James for just over 2 years now. I liked him at first. He was good for her. He made her happy, so I was happy. But for the last year or so, every time I have seen or chatted to Kayla, all she has done is complain about him. Some of the stuff she has told me about him is super gross, and I have lost all respect for him, and in turn, I have started losing respect for her. She has also changed a lot since being with him. She used to want to travel the world, explore and experience new things. Now she never leaves her house and wants to be a stay-at-home mother by the time she's 25. It makes me sad to see. She has lost her sparkle. It all came to a head when we went for dinner for my birthday. She spent the whole night complaining about James, as always, telling me way too much personal stuff about him, as always, and just generally moaning. It was after we had finished our meal when I finally snapped and said I don't want to hear any more about her shitty boyfriend, because everything I advise her to do she just ignores and I have nothing left to say to her. I told her she should dump him if she hates him so much, and if she isn't going to dump him then to quit bitching about him all the time because I didn't want to hear it anymore. I had had quite a few glasses of wine and was just feeling super bummed because she made my whole birthday dinner about her and her stupid boyfriend. This was 5 days ago and she hasn't spoken to me since. I messaged her the next morning apologizing and asked her if we could meet up to talk about it, but she hasn't responded. Relevant comments. To a longer YTA comment. OP, thank you for your comment. I do actually agree with you after reflecting. I haven't ever told her that I'm tired of her not taking my advice, and I have never asked her to not complain about him. This was the first time I had challenged her. I have always been very patient with her, and let her complain as much as she wants. This has left me feeling emotionally drained after every time I see her. I should have set boundaries in a calm and mature manner when I was sober. I was just so annoyed that she made me an entire birthday meal about her relationship issues. I had also just found out that I had got my dream job and wanted her to be happy for me. I took out my frustration on her and I spoke to her poorly. Thank you. I'm going to try and fix it with her top commenter. I mean, you took the nuclear option and drunkenly exploded on her rather than having a civil conversation about how the constant complaining was impacting you and your friendship. Of course she's hurt and pissed off. Not to say she's free and clear of taking over your birthday, but she may honestly have no idea how much she complains or how draining it can be for others. The fact that you have lost respect for her means maybe it's time for the friendship to end. If you don't like her and you don't like being around her, what's the point of the relationship? Don't expect her to forgive you for handling the situation like you did instead of like a real friend would though. Alcohol ultimately didn't make you do this. OP, alcohol didn't make me do this. I did it because I didn't communicate sooner, and I had a lot of pent-up anger. I shouldn't have spoken to her like that and I am going to apologize. Commenter, downvoted. You are the asshole. Get off booze and other drugs. OP, I accept I'm the asshole, but if I want to have a few glasses of wine on my birthday, that is my prerogative. I don't do drugs, and I am over the legal drinking age. I had 3 glasses of wine on my birthday. Commenter, NTA, the best thing you can do is let her be right now. When she's ready to talk she will reach out to you. OP, I'm worried that if I let her be, she will never reach out and I will lose her as a friend. I don't want to lose her. Despite her frustrating me with constantly talking about her boyfriend, she's a good person. I was thinking of writing her a letter to apologize and explain how I feel. IDK. Commenter, a letter may be a good idea, especially if she has blocked you on social media or is avoiding your messages. Do you have any mutual friends willing to tell Kayla how you feel? OP? She hasn't blocked me, but she has already ignored one message, so I feel like she would just keep ignoring me. All of our mutual friends have dropped her because they can't deal with her complaining. They're all telling me to unfriend her, but I'm not ready to do that. Commenter. Is the relationship just bad, or is it abusive? Not acting like her usual self, her spark is gone. Those are red flags. If it is an abusive relationship, and emotional abuse very much is abuse, then make sure to leave the door open for her to contact you when she's ready to leave. Abusers isolate and control their victims, and cutting off friends and family is part of the goal. If the support system is gone, it's harder to leave. So tell her that you will always be there for her if she decides to leave him. That does not mean you have to keep listening to her. Tell her that you are done hearing about this guy and set whatever boundaries you need, but tell her that when she is ready to leave him, you are there for her. OP, it isn't abusive. If anything, she's not very nice to him. She doesn't like the guy, I don't know why she stays with him. She struggles with her mental health, and he's a very lazy guy, so encourages her to stay in bed all day. He isn't what she needs, but he isn't abusive. Who paid for dinner? OP. I paid. It did need to be said, but not in the way it was. I want to apologize for the way I say it, not for how I feel. Commenter. So let me get this straight. Your best friend of 12 years goes to your birthday dinner empty-handed and you pay for it. She spends the whole night making it about herself and her stupid BF, and it got you to the point of yelling at her, rightfully so, and now she's giving you the cold shoulder. This girl is not your friend, she's a user. This is not a friendship worth having. IDC what financial situation is, if it's your BFF birthday, you make it work. It's not about money, it's about effort. If she truly couldn't afford to go out, then she could have made you dinner and a birthday cake and bought a $2 bottle of wine. OP, yeah, I guess that's true. I told her not to get me anything because she's broke. I wasn't expecting anything, but I was expecting her to at least ask me how I am, instead of just talking about her boyfriend. IDK Update 1. Edit. Thank you all for your comments. I can see you're all very divided about if I'm the asshole or not, and I get why. I have accepted that I am the asshole for going nuclear when drunk, and I know I should have spoken to her in a mature and calm manner way earlier than I did. She shouldn't have ruined my birthday dinner, but she is struggling. She didn't deserve to be spoken to like that. I have decided to write her a letter apologizing for the way I spoke to her. I am going to write, very nicely, that I still stand by what I said and that I love her, but hearing her complain repeatedly about the same issue without taking advice is very draining. I'm going to tell her I want to still be friends and that I don't want this to ruin our friendship. I will also recommend she goes back to therapy. She had a therapist in high school but ghosted her. If she then reads my letter and decides to end the friendship, then that is up to her. I will be sad, but everything happens for a reason. Right. Update 2. Firstly, thank you so much for everyone who commented and messaged me. Nice or not, it was great to get everyone's opinion. So I wrote Kayla a letter, like I said I was going to in my edit. It felt very formal and weird to do, but for some reason doing it over text felt wrong. I wanted her to know I'm sincere. I said that I love her, and I value our friendship extensively, and apologized for the way I spoke to her. I said alcohol wasn't to blame. I was. I spoke to her like an asshole and she didn't deserve it. I wrote that I have felt frustrated about the situation for a long time now, because it upset me seeing her so frustrated and upset all the time with the person who is supposed to cherish and respect her the most. I told her that I wholeheartedly believe that she should end the relationship. I said I knew this wasn't my place to say, and that she didn't need to take my advice, and that I would support her in whatever decision she made. But if she decided to stay with him, I need her to stop complaining to me about James and their relationship, because it was too draining for me to hear it. I said of course she could talk to me about anything major, but hearing the same complaints on an almost daily basis was exhausting, especially when she wouldn't take or even listen to any advice. I made sure to tell her I loved her and I apologized again. I actually apologized 4 times in the letter. I put it through her front door the day after I posted here. She called me yesterday and asked to meet. I went round to her place last night and we talked for just over 2 hours. She told me she actually broke up with James the day after my birthday. Apparently me snapping at her about it shocked her into realizing how often she was upset by him and how much she complained. She has spent the last few days processing everything, so that's why I hadn't heard from her, which is so valid. She actually thanked me for doing it, which is crazy. She said although I was a bit of an asshole, it was what she needed to hear. We both cried a lot and hugged it out and then watched 90 Day Fiancé LOL. I think it's safe to say we will be okay. She is obviously struggling because she is grieving their relationship and breakups are awful. But I will support her through this, like I always do, because I know that she will support me when I next get my heart broken. I am single AF right now, but who knows what the future holds. So the TLDR is that me snapping at my best friend at my birthday dinner for complaining about her boyfriend for the whole meal caused her to dump him. I didn't lose the friendship, I actually got my best friend back. I can't wait to support her while she finds herself again. Thank you all again, have a great day everyone. My wife will not shut up and I'm not sure I can take it that much longer. Is it possible for that to be a reason to leave? I'm not sure if I should have posted this on AITA instead. But here goes, my wife will not shut up. I'm not talking about your usual chatty Kathy. I mean she almost literally will not shut up. She will talk continuously from the moment she knows I'm within earshot. Not just in the same room. I mean as soon as it's reasonable to assume that I can hear her. She will not stop talking until I'm gone, and sometimes not even then. On more than one occasion, I've gone into the bathroom, turned on the loud exhaust fan, taken a leisurely dump, and then returned to hear her cheerfully engaged in the same conversation she was enjoying before I went in. She also refuses to use the exhaust fan while she's in the restroom because it would prevent her from being heard. So I get to hear all the bathroom noises on top of whatever Homeric epic about her friend's cousin's girlfriend's hairdresser she's blathering on about. I once drove from Tampa, Florida to Chicago, Illinois with her, before we were married. I'm such an idiot. Without saying more than 10 sentences. She did not stop talking the entire way. The entire way. Television onto a show I like? Pfft, that's not a problem. She'll happily turn the volume down so it doesn't get in the way. Having sex? That's the perfect time to tell me about how Olivia Newton-John still has the leather pants she wore in Grease and she, brace yourself, still fits in them. Really. Needless to say, we don't go to the movies. Ever. I've been shushed out of too many theaters. I get it. She grew up in a huge Italian Catholic family in the Bronx. If you don't talk loud and constantly, you don't get to talk at all. I, on the other hand, grew up in a Scandinavian family with 2 children. To this day, I'm not sure we ever had a conversation in our house. I actually often wonder if that's what made me attractive to her. I was taught to politely listen to people and then wait for them to finish before replying. She never finishes, or takes a breath it sometimes seems. So to her I'm paying rapt attention to her no matter how much she talks. That's not true though. Another difference between people of Swedish heritage is that we don't use filler words for acknowledgement. Other than the Minnesota nah, useful on every occasion. We're pretty much silent when we listen to others. No or yeah or OMG needed. A nod of the head every 10 minutes or so is all you need to convey your attentiveness. I think it has a lot to do with living in the frigid north. You keep your mouth open as much as my wife does, and your teeth are going to shatter from the cold. To her, that's like being in the room with a dead person. She's always stopping to ask, are you even listening? Or say, you never pay attention to me. Or even quiz me with, what did I just say? I've become an expert at storing the last 2 to 4 words she says and parroting them back at her. She'll be like, blah blah blah. And then she told him she wasn't taking that kind of crap anymore. And I'll go, that kind of crap. As if I had any idea what kind of crap it was or who it was that wouldn't take it anymore. And she'll say yeah, and think I've been paying attention the whole time. I joke about it a lot, but it's actually getting to the point where it's a problem. Our son is 7 years old, and he has developed a pronounced stutter because she interrupts him constantly. Growing up in her house, if anyone paused even for a millisecond, that was grounds for talking over them. And you talked loud so they didn't finish. My son apparently inherited some of my less staccato speech patterns, and she basically just uses that to interrupt and take over the conversation. It got so bad that he started automatically stopping and restarting words, even when not being interrupted. I didn't know that was considered a stutter until we went to one of those parent-teacher night things, and a teacher listened to wife and then turned to me and said, well, at least now I know why Josh has a stutter. Just like that. She's failed at least one job interview because of this. I know because I lined it up with a business acquaintance myself. He called me up and said sorry, but he just couldn't take being in the same room with her because she wouldn't stop talking. We rarely are invited for a second couples date. She monopolizes the conversation every time we go out with other people. Who wants more than one does of that? You're probably wondering, well, have you told her about this? Yes. Many times. Sometimes jokingly. Sometimes with utter seriousness. The reactions vary from anger, talks louder, higher, faster, and uses lots more swear words, to tears. She's the only person I know who can carry on a totally unrelated conversation while sobbing hysterically. The one thing that doesn't happen is her talking any less. I try not to let it get to me. She's a very affectionate woman. Loves me to death. Mother of my child. Pretty as the day we met, prettier even. We still get plenty of alone time. Granted, she won't shut up while we're doing it, but I'm pretty busy so I don't really notice as much. But it does get to me. It's selfish and shows a lack of self-awareness. There's a time and a place for enthusiastic conversation, and they're not always in everywhere. I know the answer to the problem. I have to talk back. In effect, the only thing that possibly could shut her up is for me to do the same thing as she does. I would have to interrupt at the slightest pause. I would have to talk louder, yelling if necessary, when she tries to interrupt me. I would have to learn to use Italian hand gestures to emphasize my points and chop off her objections. But I'm not Italian. I'm a waspy pale dude who grew up in a household that would have made a mortuary sound like a middle school cafeteria. 12 years of this has finally pushed me to the brink. I'm not sure I can take it that much longer. I'm just not sure if I could get a word in to tell the judge why I'm there in his divorce court. My wife wouldn't let me. TL.dr. Wife will not shut up. Is that reasonable grounds for leaving her? Edit. Obligatory Reddit. OMG, I had no idea this would blow up. Which is true. I thought maybe a couple of people would just call me an asshole and that would be it. But RIP. Inbox. It was nice to know you. So in the interest of not replying to every comment, I will try to address some of the common ones and answer some of the questions I saw popping up multiple times. Also thanks for the, often hilarious, advice. Q1. Is this BS? Implied. A1. No, it's all mostly true. I admit to some embellishment for dramatic comedic effect though. The bit about the leather pants is representative, not an actual quote. Not from Sexy Times anyway. She probably mentioned it at some point though. Q2. Why didn't you run away screaming before you got married? Sub-question. Was OP's wife hot? A 2. Yes, she is hot, and funny, and vivacious. Also, I really was a Nordic silent bear. Thanks, you/Sarah_Dragonfire. My wife drew me out of my shell. And if I'm brutally honest with myself, when you're young and getting laid on the regular, a lot of things don't seem all that terrible. Damn you, penis. This is all your fault. Q3. Did your kid really develop a stutter because of this? A 3. Medically speaking, I cannot state this with 100% certainty. The cause was never formally diagnosed. However, I watched it happen firsthand. I'm not a qualified speech therapist, but I think it was a reasonable conclusion to draw based on the observations I made. I'd welcome a dissenting opinion from an actual professional though, if only to salve my conscience. Which leads to Q4. Aren't you really the one responsible for your kid's stutter? After all, you did nothing to stop it. A 4. Guilty. And I feel utterly like shit about it all the time. For the record, I did bring it up lots of times, even to the point of getting into arguments about it and speaking harshly to my wife when she interrupted my son. But I think by the time I realized it was happening, most of the damage was done. And anything I could do was more expressing my anger about it than actually making an effective change. All the rest of this weirdly long post is just ranting. If there's an actual justification for leaving, this is it, and I'm deathly afraid that she'll get full custody and just make it worse or even irreparable. Q5. Is it because she's, pick one, OCD, insecure, autistic, mentally ill? A 5. I don't think so, although I've always sensed an overwhelming need for attention. I see it in her family dynamic, in that all of her many siblings were in constant competition for their parents' attention and affection. Q6. Have you tried counseling? A 6. No, probably should have, but I know her well enough that even mentioning it would shatter her. It's bizarre that I can't bring myself to do a lot of things people have suggested, and believe me, I've probably thought of all of them, because they just seem too cruel to me. And yet, I'm seriously considering divorce. I realize the contradiction there. This is fucked up by texting my date that I might end up marrying him just seconds after our date ended. This just happened to me. Literally 10 minutes ago. I am dying. I am dead. End me now, oh Holy Ghost. I thought this only happened in some poorly written rom-coms. The kind where life hardly imitates the real one. I want to bury myself and never come to see the light again. Why me? Oh, why me? 10 painfully long minutes ago, I, exalted by the wonderful date I went with this handsomely gorgeous man who also happened to be a friend of mine for the last 3 years, against my apartment door that I had just closed on his beautiful face, I typed these words that will fiercely haunt me now. Bitch, I think I'm going to end up marrying this guy. This was meant for my best friend, the only other soul I could muster to express my vulnerable feelings. I sent this deeply poetic text to him instead. Do you think there is a void big enough in this planet to hold all my misery? All the embarrassment? Do you think I can make a pact with the devil to turn back time? I would just need 10 minutes. That'd be really nice. Can I please die now? Literal and metaphorical death is the only relief I might know. I am currently in my library, sprawled across the floor intently staring at the ceiling. Man, I think I'll be here forever. TLDR, I mistakenly texted my date that I might end up marrying him as we just ended our date. Realized too late the text meant for my best friend was sent to him instead. Bitch, I owe you an update. Good news, there's so much staring at the ceiling one can do before pure boredom kicks in and the realization that the desire to scream fuck 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 at the top of your lungs will most likely not last for an eternity. Bad news, you guys did me dirty by blasting my still fresh embarrassment on the front page and apparently on a famous Portuguese radio show this morning. Cool. So, on to the meaty love update. Once I realized the text blunder, I quickly texted him that it was not meant for him, with a crying emoji for good measure. Sweet, sweet man that he is. He responded immediately to let me know that he doesn't read text not meant for him. I subsequently asked for permission to die. He said. Please don't. This morning, he texted me about some travel plans we have down the line. Bless this handsome man. The gods are cruel, but not that cruel. This is where I should clarify that the original post was obviously a tad hyperbolic, just like that text. Go figure. I slept well last night, and I also laughed. At myself, the blunder, just the ridiculous timing. What also got imprinted on me was that exact moment I wrote and sent that text. The moment he leaned and kissed me goodnight, I looking at him as I closed my apartment door, locking it and at once turning around and heavily sighing and smiling, keys still in hand. 2 weeks ago he had proposed going on a walk at the park. I had an inkling somehow that after knowing each other for 3 years, he was going to finally, perhaps, become vulnerable and share a few things. I had been in a serious relationship when we met, and what I know now to be out of respect in my ironclad boundaries, he never made any advances. But I was single now. And at the park, sitting there, together, he looked at me and said he had feelings for me. Long time, 3-year-long feelings. And right there at Prospect Park, on a clear night, under some 35 visible stars, we counted, he kissed me. Last night, it was my turn to be vulnerable, even if accidentally. For once, I think I understand Ted. He was always the guy I wanted to throw my shoe at whenever his ridiculous face showed up on the screen, which was a lot. As for the library, I'm not Jane Austen, but I'm a New Yorker, and the luxury of ample space is not something I recognize. My dream as a child refugee, growing up in deep poverty, was to have a dedicated place for all the books I could buy when I would grow up and have money. Here's a pic of my library nook that I built through vintage thrifting, DIY projects and patience. The library. This is it, folks, the update. I might prefer this life over any rom-com. Relevant comments. The pic of the library is gone, but OP explains it in a comment, you guys. It's not a literal library. It's a corner of my apartment I've turned into a library nook. Also, for what it's worth, this is an embarrassing story that just literally happened to me. But believe me, as a refugee who has suffered through deep poverty from early childhood, I'm well aware of all of the hardships existing out there. Now, let me go back to staring at the ceiling. Comment 1. You just ruined my mental picture of you in a dramatic swoon across a plush tapestry on the floor of a dusty Victorian library, cheeks flushed and with the back of your hand across your forehead, muttering things like, woe is me and verily, I am vexed. Comment 2. Make it into a joke. Bring up that. That's what they say in those rom-coms, and honestly just make it a laughable experience for both. Example. Bitch, I think I'm going to end up marrying this guy. Says every girl on a rom-com. Make it into a quote. I don't know how to explain it, but I'm the type of person to turn my fuck up into a joke. OP. I'm probably going to greet him with a chirpy, hi husband, next time I see him. Comment 3. You can only refer to him as bitch from here on out. Update. 3 years after I mistakenly pressed send, texting this gorgeous specimen of a guy I would marry him seconds after ending our first date, keys still in hand as I struggled to both text and lock the door and subsequently sprawled across my library wishing for the floor to engulf me. I did end up marrying the man. Damn, what in the world life? Thought I'd let you guys know since you did help me with your funny comments and shared shameful moments to eventually get myself up that fateful evening, dust myself off, and not commit cringe seppuku. It's been 3 years of pure joy and he's still as dreamy and kind, you guys. And it was kids, that's how I met your father after all. See you in the next chapter. TLDR, bitch, I married the man. Sending that text by mistake 3 years ago telling him I'd marry him right after our first date was just the truth. I punished my son for a cruel prank on an autistic girl, straining our relationship. Now, he lives with my ex-husband, who is suing me for child support. I, F48, have a son Jack, M19, and a daughter Alyssa, F18, and am married to Tom, M50. Tom is Alyssa's father, but Jack's father is my ex-husband Dan, M48. Dan and I had a pretty ugly custody fight and he lives in NY while we live in TX. Over the years, Dan has unsuccessfully tried to get Jack to move in with him. It wasn't easy to fight him off since he is a very successful lawyer. Jack is a pretty popular kid in school. His friends on the wrestling team came up with a prank for him to ask a heavily autistic girl who had a crush on him to the prom as a joke and for him to show up wearing a gorilla suit. Jack originally said no, but the wrestling team actually raised a fund which got to be somewhat north of $800 for him to do it, and they paid for the gorilla suit. Jack agreed. If it matters, this is very out of character for him. After the prom, I was looking around on Instagram and saw pictures of him in the gorilla suit and was surprised that he didn't take his girlfriend Jess. After reading the comments, I learned what happened. To say I was furious doesn't even do it justice. I woke Jack up as soon as I saw it and screamed at him until my lungs gave out. Then when Tom heard what was going on, he joined in. Tom and Jack have never gotten along. I can't prove it, but I suspect Jack's father Dan has a hand in that. Jack told Tom, "Fuck off, I'm talking to my mother." So we took away all of Jack's electronics, his phone, and we had paid for a car for his graduation present. Because of his prank and disrespect to Tom, we instead gave it to Alyssa. We also forced him to give us the $800 plus, and we gave it to his date and made him write a letter of apology. He was also grounded for a month and we canceled his 18th birthday party. When Jack's birthday cake, there was a knock at the door. It was Dan and he had suitcases. Tom said, "What is this? The custody agreement says you don't get him on this birthday." Dan just looked past Tom and said, "Hey kid, I'm here for the jailbreak." He then pointed at a Mustang and said, "Hope you like Fords. You can practice driving your new car on a road trip back to NY. Let's take a detour to NOLA." The two of them were laughing, high-fiving and backslapping, and they just ignored us as we tried to intervene. The only time Dan acknowledged me was to look me in the eye and say as cold as ice, "Checkmate." And for Jack to yell as they were driving off, "Fuck off, Tom." Since then, Jack has gone totally no contact with me. He talks a little bit to Alyssa, and from the little he does tell her, he's doing well, and Dan is giving him the royal treatment, bringing him to steakhouses, Yankees games, and just giving him outright cash. It has been almost a year and I'm going crazy thinking I've lost my son. So AITA. Edit. I see there's a little confusion here about whether Alyssa is my bio daughter or stepdaughter. She is my stepdaughter. We really have a mother-daughter relationship to the point where it doesn't even occur to me to call her my step. At the risk of understatement, Jack never warmed to Tom the same way. Note from me. Edit. People have pointed out I should have provided more context regarding OOP's comment section. I didn't originally think this was necessary, but it's clearly been told to me that was wrong. I can't remake this thread, but I can add what I feel are relevant comments. On thought process behind the punishment, he never really got into that much trouble and is largely a good kid. He'd sometimes get into fights, but that all cleared up a few years ago. We'd usually just ground him and make him do extra chores, and that was enough. But it didn't come up a whole lot. Recently, it was maybe grounding him for a weekend here or there for a badly blowing curfew. Be home at 11 and he rolls in at 12:45. I can't say I had a fully formed plan on what the discipline would be for the prank alone, since it all kind of happened at once, but to me at least, the big thing was the prank, and telling Tom to fuck off definitely mattered, but was small potatoes compared to that. But less so to Tom, for obvious reasons. On Dan, OOP's ex-husband, and his motivation. There is some truth here. I wasn't very kind to Dan when the marriage broke down and could have been more equitable with custody matters in the divorce, which created a lot of bad blood from Dan's side. As much as I'd like to agree that I just have to wait for Dan to get sick of throwing money at Jack, I can't deny that Dan actually does pretty well by Jack, and also that he likely isn't going to be running short on money anytime soon. I spent every day with Dan for so many years and know that man very well. He is an extremely calculating man. His exact thought process was that he saw the perfect opportunity to take his son back after years of feeling slighted through the divorce process and then hit with everything he had. It worked. Dan always plays the long game, just like I'm sure he's going to play the long game to keep things the way they are. More on Dan. As much as I'd like to demonize Dan, and there are a lot of things I can really say about him, he does truly love Jack and has really wanted custody for a long time. If it was simple gamesmanship, I think he wouldn't have been so brutal about it. He truly feels I stole his son. On the extent of the punishment and Jack's relationship with Tom, stepfather. The story with Tom was that my son just never respected him as any kind of authority figure. Even as a young child, if Tom would tell him to do something, he'd tell Tom that he was just a rude guest in his house. I can't prove it, but I have to think Dan had a hand in it. How else would Jack know that it was my money from the divorce that bought the house and that Tom was broke? Also funny you mention about my son calling Dan with his side of the story. I have no idea how he did that. I had his phone locked away for 2 weeks when that happened. I suspect that his GF Jess somehow had a hand in it, even though he was barred from seeing Jess. Part of the reason I think that is this arrangement works out so well for her. She's going to NYU for college, and somehow Dan pulled some stunt to get Jack into Temple in Philly, so they take turns spending weekends with each other in either NY or Philly. Dan's Instagram post from last week was the three of them having dinner together at Peter Luger's. On money troubles and child support issues, I just feel so stupid. I know Dan. He has been waiting years for an opportunity like this, and I handed him the perfect storm. I am not proud of it, but I did not treat Dan very well towards the end of the marriage. To be clear, I never cheated on him though. But he has hated me since then. Also, since he doesn't live with me anymore, child support is terminated. We divorced in New York, where child support goes to 21. I don't know how I'm going to make next month's mortgage. Dan is a very high earner, so it was a big check. He can actually go after me now for child support, and my lawyer tells me he has already filed the paperwork for that. More on child support. Tom is on disability. I knew I'd have a problem in 3 years when Jack aged out of child support, but I was hoping Tom would be back to work by then. Unfortunately, I am very familiar with the way child support works. You have a number for household income which gets negotiated after it gets to a certain point, because the law says you stop counting dollar for dollar above a threshold. Then after that total is arrived, you split by relative income. I do pretty well, but not like Dan. I used to do better before COVID. At the time of the divorce, I won a very high household income split. It was good for me back then since he had to pay me. Now I have to pay Dan my portion of that very high number. So I get the double whammy of losing the checks I was getting, and now I have to write big checks his way. On Tom and Jack's difficult relationship. I tried to introduce Tom slowly and things started out okay. They were never warm, but it was peaceful. Things started getting rougher when Tom moved in. He had an accident at work and got behind on bills. It was a little sooner than we would have liked, but Jack had known him for a year at that point. It started with little things, like Tom telling Jack to clean his room, or put away his plates, or mow the lawn. Jack just wouldn't do it. I'd noticed that every time Dan flew down to spend a weekend with Jack, it got a bit worse. I remember a few years ago overhearing Jack on the phone call Tom my pet loser. A phrase I know Dan has used about others before. When Jack was 16, there was one time that Tom's back was hurting and he told Jack to warm him up with a plate of leftovers, and Jack was playing a game and told him to get it himself. Tom unplugged his Xbox and then Jack said, "This fucking guy, he stays here for free, eats free food, and now even thinks he has a butler. This isn't a fucking hotel, Tom. You can't afford one." Then another time when Tom told him to mow the lawn and Jack said, "Don't tell me to mow the lawn at my own house. You mow the lawn and make me a sandwich when you're done." Jack isn't like this with anyone else. He's usually very kind, quick-witted, and gracious. The thing that freaks me out is that he is almost exactly like his father. If he likes you, he'll be as debonair and smooth as can be. But if he doesn't, he really doesn't. And he truly hates Tom. More on their relationship. The end of the marriage wasn't pretty. I have to take responsibility for that, and the divorce was very contentious. Following that, there was a lot of bad blood, but it definitely got worse once Tom entered the picture. Tom once made a Facebook joke about how he wishes they would bring back paddling in schools. To say Dan went nuts does not cover it. He literally got on a plane immediately from New York, busted into my house, and started making all kinds of accusations and threats against Tom. Tom had to literally lock himself in the bathroom and escape out the window because we all thought Dan was going to do something crazy. Following that, I had to spend the next 2 years in litigation proving that Tom never has and never will lay a hand on Jack. Jack has also been rubbing it in Tom's face that has his father's permission to defend himself against Tom if he ever wants to get old-fashioned with him. Jack is a 6'2" wrestling champion and MMA hobbyist. Tom is a 50-year-old man with a bad back half his size, and they are both keenly aware of it. If Tom ever laid a hand on Jack, I'd see to it that he'd be in jail. But I suspect his first stop from any such encounter would be the trauma ward. Yet more on their relationship. There's a little culture clash between Jack and Tom. Tom is an old-fashioned Texas man where he believes kids should do what they're told. Jack grew up in Manhattan. Believe me, Tom has way dialed things down from what he'd normally do, but he does believe that kids should listen to adults and help out around the house. He realizes that there is a lot of tension and that his usual approach isn't going to work, and I have even told him that if he tries it, I won't be able to maintain the marriage if he can't find a way to make a peaceable home with my son. After I told him that, he mostly just tried to step out of any kind of parental role, but sometimes he'd still tell Jack to do something and Jack would react very badly. Jack acknowledging his wrongdoing, but still feeling the punishment was way too harsh. Thanks. He has blocked my number. Alyssa does still talk with him a bit since they had a cordial enough relationship. She even offered to give him the car back to make peace. He told her to keep it since he has a better car now, and told her that he doesn't have any bad blood against her. For a while he was telling her that he'd never forgive me. He appreciates that he did wrong, but that I took it way too far by taking the car away and because I wouldn't let him see his GF for a month. The last time Alyssa brought it up, there was some movement on that. He said maybe sometime in the distant future, but not for years. So Alyssa is acting as a bit of a back channel. However, she's still so young and I don't like asking her to be in the middle of it, which must be hard because it really pains her how she sees Jack as a big brother and how bad Jack's relationship is with her father. OOP on apologies and potentially fixing this. I don't know if I agree with all of this, but for what it is worth, I have tried offering apologies. He has blocked my phone, but I sent him emails where I apologized for giving his car to Alyssa, for screaming at him, for trying to force a relationship with Tom on him, and for taking the money. He has never responded. You do have a good suggestion though, apologizing to Dan. Dan hates me. To take some accountability, the reason for the divorce is I didn't treat Dan very well during the marriage. He resented the custody schedule. He thought the child support was far beyond what was needed to support Jack, and he made no bones about the fact he considered me to have stolen his money and his son. But with all that said, the worst he can do is hang up on me. Update: I was denied an official update, but a few of you cared enough about all of this to ask me for updates periodically, so here it is. On the advice of some of the posters, I reached out to Dan to see if he'd be willing to consider brokering peace between me and Jack. About a week later I got a response telling me to meet him and Jack at a cafe in Manhattan. He arranged a 6 a.m. flight and put me in a dodgy hotel in probably the most dangerous neighborhood in NYC. I arrived and saw Dan, Jack's GF Jess, and his friend from a past firm, Jonathan. I noticed Jess had an engagement ring on her finger. Jonathan said Jack has a claim against me for stealing the $840, and until that is resolved, I am not to contact him, but to only contact Jonathan. I told Jonathan that's the money his friends paid him for the prank and that I gave to the girl. Jonathan said he was aware of the circumstances, but nonetheless it wasn't my money, and under the law, it was a theft and Jack has a legal claim against me. I said I don't care if it was against the law, Jack had no right to that money and they could sue me if they wanted. Jack said, "You locked me up in my room like a prisoner for a month, took the car bought for me with Dad's child support money, took the money and berated me for hours on end. Unless you're going to give me the car, this is the only thing you can undo. You said you wished we could have handled it better, so here is your chance. Or was that just bullshit lip service?" I told him I was sorry, but I can't do it. Jonathan then gave me a cease and desist letter telling me to not contact Jack and to address all communication to Jonathan. Then Jack and Jess left and I asked Dan if he could talk for a minute. I asked him if he brought me there to humiliate me, and he said actually no, he didn't. He brought me so I could humiliate myself. He'd actually worked very hard to get Jack to the point where he'd be open to talking to me again if I were willing to back down just a little. But since he knew that if I had to choose between my indignation and my own son, that I'd choose my indignation every time, just like I did in our marriage. I asked him why he'd put us all through that. He said it was because a part of him wondered if I'd ever learn to pick love over anger. He bet his future that I wouldn't when he divorced me. So he had to see for himself how it actually turned out after all these years later. I asked him if Jack was just a pawn in his game. He said no, if I actually would have picked Jack he'd be with me now and there would have been nothing anyone could have done to stop it. But instead, my indignation over a stranger was more important to me than learning to move on with my own son. I asked him what about the girl. He then said, "I hope she'll be a wonderful daughter to you since you lost a son for her." I told her I don't know the girl. So then he said sounds like a bad trade, and left. Also, I'm apparently not invited to Jack's wedding. At this point I posted thanks for posting the update. I'm a little confused why you weren't willing to pay the money. These are some quotes from comments you said earlier. If you lose your only child, nothing else really matters. I didn't understand that before. Hopefully you never do. On if you would be willing to divorce Tom to get Jack back. If I had to, yes. Truthfully, that's kind of been falling apart anyway, and the only reason I haven't divorced him is because I don't want to lose Alyssa. I should never have touched the car. I should have just grounded him, insisted on the apology, and maybe also made him hand over the money. Losing a relationship with a child is a hell of a thing. It is like death. I hate what he did, but there is nothing worth losing a child over. I lost my son for that girl who I don't even know. Exact words were high road, low road, I don't care. Whatever wins. The irony is that now I'm sitting where he was, except worse. I'd do anything for him back. So after all that, you weren't willing to give Jack his $800 back. Where is the disconnect here? If you are really willing to do whatever it takes, then why weren't you willing to do this? And her response? I was so angry. I am still so angry. He was sitting there, smug as can be with his little girlfriend, my ex, and my ex's best friend there as his lawyer. At that moment, I just couldn't. The whole thing was to humiliate me. They stuck me in a crack den of a hotel, Made me trek all over New York. Then they all show up laughing and backslapping, and the lawyer tells me I can't talk to my own son unless I pay him $800. I just don't even know what to do anymore. Dan reversed the polarity on the child support, and I'm now a few months behind on the mortgage, and the hole gets deeper and deeper. I placed my house for sale on the market. I'm just at wit's end. Weird guy shows up at my parents' house at 1 a.m. using details about my life from 20 years ago. Help me figure this out. Original post, October 5th, 2022. I posted this on the Creepy Encounters sub and someone suggested I post here. This happened 3 nights ago and I'm going crazy trying to figure it out. I just moved into a new apartment 1 month ago and I'm still unpacking and settling in. I have been using my parents' address as my mailing address, who live a few towns over, 20 minutes away, all of my life. 3 nights ago my parents called me at 2 a.m., freaked out and told me this story. Apparently, at 1 a.m. someone started banging on their front door and repeatedly ringing their doorbell. My stepdad walked downstairs and opened the door, leaving the front glass door closed and locked. There was a man standing outside, who looked to be in his 30s, with a black hoodie on with the hood pulled up around his face. He did not have any distinguishing facial features, facial hair, or tattoos. The only thing my stepdad said was that he looked to be Hispanic. Neither my stepdad nor my mother, who was watching the whole thing out a window, recognized the man. The man said, "I am so sorry to bother you, but I am looking for my full name." My stepdad played dumb and said, "Who?" The man proceeded to state my full name again and said that my boyfriend was worried because I did not come home that night. He claimed to be a friend of my boyfriend and told my stepdad that they were both out looking for me, worried because I did not show up at home. I do not have a boyfriend. I live by myself with my 3 dogs and have not been in a relationship in the past 5 to 6 months. Here is the weird part. My stepdad asked the guy what boyfriend he was talking about, and the man told him the name of the boyfriend I had when I was in 10th grade, nearly 20 years ago. My boyfriend in 10th grade has a very, very unique Italian name. I have never met anyone with a full name even close to his. He said my high school boyfriend's name a few more times to ensure my stepdad heard him and repeated that they were very worried about me, and asked if my stepdad was sure I was not inside. At this point, my stepdad was weirded out and closed and locked the door in his face. The man did not leave. He lingered in front of my parents' house for the next 10 minutes, smoking cigarettes and talking on the phone. Finally, my parents called the cops. About 5 minutes before the cops arrived, the man walked down to the dead end on their block and drove away in a silver car. My stepdad was unable to get the license plate. My parents filed a police report and nothing else happened. After I heard this story, I am going nuts over the weird details. How would someone know who I dated nearly 20 years ago, and what would the motive be for making up a story that included that weird detail about my past? I have not had contact with a 10th grade boyfriend in over a decade. Yesterday, I decided to message him on Facebook to see if he has any insight. I told him the whole story. He was just as confused as I am and claimed to have no part in it. I am at a loss. I am also really freaked out that some strange man is going through that much trouble at 1 a.m. to look for me. Any insights or ideas would be greatly appreciated. No, nothing else weird has happened since then. Edit, update 1. Wow, this really blew up. Thank you so much for all the kind words and precautions that I should take. I want to add something here that a few people commented on, that might shine some light on this mystery. First off, I am not in any legal trouble and have no reason to think someone would be suing me. God, I guess it is always in the realm of possibility that I am being sued by someone, but I really do not think that is it. Like I previously commented, I had an expired registration ticket that I did not show up to court for, but I believe I got a letter in the mail just asking me to pay a really large fee, so I do not think that is related. I did take a personal loan out. I took it out about 1.5 years ago. It was not for anything too crazy, and I was really good with making payments on time until about 6 months ago when I had a medical issue. Currently, I am really behind on payments, but to my knowledge I have not defaulted on the loan yet. What do you guys think? Related? I had absolutely no idea that this is a thing, or I would have included this detail to begin with. Let me know your thoughts. Edit, update 2. I have a list of a few things that I'm going to look into tomorrow, based on my own thoughts and based on a ton of valuable feedback I got in here. Thank you. We'll post an update ASAP. Edit, Update 3. I am so sorry it has taken me so long to update. It is a super busy time at work. Unfortunately, there is not much to report. I called the loan company. They claimed to have nothing to do with it. All of my friends and family also noted that the 1 a.m. factor kind of rules that out anyway. Nothing else strange has happened at my parents' house. I went there for the first time last night and kept a close eye out for anything, did not observe anything out of the norm. So this remains a mystery. I will be sure to update if something else happens. July 12, 2024, 1 year and a half later. Alright, 1 year later, I finally have an update to this insane mystery. I will include the original story here first, followed by the update. Recent update. After this happened, my family, a couple of close friends, and I have been discussing this mystery in depth to try and figure it out. We all have our own theories, but ultimately, no definitive answer as to what happened or who this creepy guy was. So we pretty much put it to rest and only joked about it once in a while. Here is the update. My stepsister, my stepdad's daughter, and her fiancé were at a house party right after the holidays, around early January of this year. While they were there, they started talking to a girl that neither of them knew. After some time talking together, the girl started talking about her ex-boyfriend and how they were going through a really tough time together. They had just recently broken up and she felt really bad because he was a wreck over it. Somehow, it came up that this girl's ex-boyfriend was my 10th grade boyfriend, the one with the really unique Italian name. The whole situation was not that big of a coincidence since I went to high school with my stepsister's fiancé, and we have a lot of mutual friends. So it makes sense that they were at a party that would include some people I went to high school with. As soon as my stepsister and her fiancé hear this, they both start freaking out. Without revealing too many details, they tell the girl about the whole mystery and how weird it was. As they are telling the story, the girl's face starts to go white and she looks like she's about to cry. My stepsister and her fiancé try to console her and ask her what is wrong. The wine and beer had been flowing at this point, so I am sure everyone was a little tipsy. The girl starts to tell them that a few nights ago, she was sleeping, and someone started banging on her door at, get this, 1 a.m. Just like what happened to me at my parents' house. The girl jumps out of bed and says she was absolutely terrified by how loud and aggressive someone was banging on her door. She said she literally thought it was going to break in. The girl has a Ring camera, so she looks at her phone. There on the camera is a guy, in a black hoodie, banging on her door. She obviously pretends like she is not home and keeps all of the lights off. He continues banging. As she is getting ready to dial 911, the guy stops and leaves. She said she was absolutely terrified. For whatever reason, she did not end up calling the cops, but she may have gone to stay with a friend that night or the night after. My stepsister and her fiancé are shocked by the details and how similar it is to my story, especially because of the mutual ex-boyfriend we share. Except this girl literally just broke things off with him. They asked the girl if she has any idea who the guy is, and she said no, but that it definitely is not the actual ex-boyfriend. She said this guy was much taller and heavier than our shared mutual ex. How weird. This mystery is still unsolved, and these new details honestly just make my head spin even more. No one else has shown up at my parents' door since the actual incident a year ago. Hi all, here are some answers to some questions. First, my 10th grade boyfriend was into drugs when I dated him back in his hawk school. I have no idea if he continued to use drugs throughout his life or not, but I can confirm that he is definitely an addict who may or may not be in recovery currently. Second, my 10th grade boyfriend has been to my parents' house multiple times. My parents still live in the same house I grew up in, and my 10th grade boyfriend has been over many times while we dated in high school. I don't know where he currently lives, but he grew up about 10 minutes away from my parents' house. Third, my 10th grade boyfriend and I had a horrific breakup. I met my high school sweetheart while I was dating him and broke up with him in a pretty messed up way. He held a grudge over it all throughout high school and was extremely nasty to me, to the point of bullying. At one point, I had to get a security guard to escort me to classes because he and his friends were bullying me so badly. The bullying was only severe for the rest of 10th grade, but he definitely hated me all through high school. Eventually, he did end up apologizing to me and explained that he was just heartbroken over me breaking up with him, but by that point, I was way past the point of forgiving him. After graduating high school, We ran into each other maybe once or twice while I was home from college, and he was totally cordial and nice with me. We laughed about the high school experiences. Additionally, I can definitely try reaching out to him on Facebook again and bringing up this whole mystery with the added updates from his recent ex-girlfriend to see what his reaction is and gauge whether or not he's being truthful. I can also ask some mutual high school friends who know him about how he currently is and if he's into any shady activities. Moreover, my stepsister only gave me the first name and a description of his recent ex-girlfriend from the party. However, I can go on my 10th grade boyfriend's Facebook and look for her under his friends, then reach out to her on Facebook Messenger to inquire about the ring footage and ask her more questions. I can also see if she ever reached out to the police. I agree that this is probably the best thing to do if I want more answers, but I need to be careful since I still don't know what is going on here. Finally, my 10th grade boyfriend does not have a brother, just one younger sister that I remember from high school. Relevant comments from OP Comment 1. I just posted some answers in the comments about the nature of my breakup with my high school boyfriend and how horrific it was and how he basically harassed me for the rest of the 10th grade. Your last theory, and what a lot of other people are commenting on, is starting to make the most sense to me. It could be that my 10th grade boyfriend has a tendency to get insanely hung up on girls and is sending a close friend or relative to do these 1 a.m. drop-bys. And this would especially make sense if he is still using drugs like he did in high school. This theory being correct would mean he lied to me when I reached out to him on Facebook a year ago, which of course he would. If this is the case, it seems like he moved on to his current ex. I just hope he doesn't swing back around to me. Comment 2. I decided I'm going to try and find out the girl's full name so I can look her up on social media. I may even be able to find her with just the first name that I already know from my steps. I can go onto my 10th grade boyfriend's Facebook and look in his friend list for a girl with the same first name who looks like she could have been his ex-girlfriend. He may even have pictures with her tagged, so it shouldn't be that hard, unless he wiped his social media clean of her after they broke up. When I'm able to find her, I'm going to reach out to her and try and get some answers. I think this is the safest route since I still don't know my 10th grade boyfriend's role in this, and I did already ask him once and he claimed to have no part in it or know anything, which may or may not have been a lie. Based on how scared my stepsis said this girl was, I'm betting she'll be willing to talk to me about it since we share the experience. I will make an update post when I have more info. Thanks everyone. Comment 3. I don't know, I would recommend against reaching out to him. Based on everything you've shared, I would be shocked if this wasn't him putting someone he knows up to this. There are other clues, but we already know he can hold a grudge and will put his friends up to bullying someone on his account. It was one incident around a year ago and nothing since, so it might be best if you just stay off his radar. Whoever is behind it, and I do think that it's him, is unhinged. I doubt he would admit to it anyway. It's your situation in your life, so you know best. Just stay safe. Comment 4. Dude, it's him. He's instigating this. Why? Probably because he's mentally unstable. I would absolutely not have any contact with him going forward. Do not reach back out to him. Don't interact on social media. Pretend he does not exist. You don't want to be drawn back into his web. How we are preparing and coping with the potential impact of the U.S. presidential election on LGBTQ rights and personal safety. We all know that the Trump versus Biden election brings much uncertainty regarding transgender and other LGBTQ rights. I have been deeply concerned about the potential implications for my female-to-male partner if Trump wins. Additionally, I am worried about our safety as a queer couple. My partner has decided to wait to start hormone therapy until after the election is over. He says he will not begin testosterone and publicly transition if Trump wins. I support his decision wholeheartedly. However, I feel a great deal of dread for him if Trump wins, as I believe that starting hormone therapy would help him significantly. I offer reassurance that whether he starts hormones or not, he is still a man in my eyes. I also try to support him emotionally as much as possible. How are you helping your transgender partner cope? Transgender individuals, if you do not mind sharing, is there anything that helps with the stress and tension? Thank you. Relevant comments. Firstly, my husband has been on hormone replacement therapy for several years now. If things go south, we will go north if we can, to Canada. It scares me to think of leaving my family, but I will go anywhere and do anything to keep my husband safe. OP, That is what I feel like we will have to do if it gets that bad. However, we both have little disposable income to move. I wonder if we could get in with a network that helps LGBTQ people move. Additionally, I do not listen to any of it. I follow an LGBTQ newsletter for my state specifically, which keeps me up to speed on court challenges and the like, and other than that, I do not listen to news or current events in my house. I already know everything is bad. I already know we are in a lose-lose situation. I am already assuming the worst regardless of who wins and planning accordingly. There is little difference in my mind between an enemy that actively wants you dead and an ally of convenience that will lull you in with false assurances and then leave you flapping in the wind when conditions deteriorate far enough. No amount of new information is going to alter my disposition or make me feel any better. It will only make me feel worse. At this point, the evangelical fear campaign is just as much of a political weapon as the laws themselves. If they cannot kill us legally, they will try to kill us with shadows on the wall. I have been learning trans DIY on Rails, using my doctor endocrinologist to check my work, having her hook me up with future reference material that she endorses, learning how to manage and synthesize hormones myself, and doing everything in my power to achieve pharmaceutical self-reliance, and maybe be proficient enough to help people near me if needed. At a certain point, if you're sufficiently isolated, you kind of have to selectively lean into the whole "don't tread on me" mindset. You have to take a leaf out of nature's playbook and cultivate an effective threat display and actually be the transgender witch nightmare that the small-minded townies are all afraid of. At least that is the course we decided on. So far, it has been a lot less stressful, even though I do not like being this kind of person. But it has certainly been getting the job done, and I do not fear for my or my spouse's safety in public, for reasons I will leave tastefully non-specific. We hold hands and kiss and express ourselves openly in public, and these spineless cretins keep their eyes down, and that is good enough for me. We will not be leaving. We are the hyenas on the hill, and they will certainly have their work cut out for them if they come waltzing up the driveway to disturb the den. OP, this is a refreshing take. I flip between stay and fight and go far away. I am thinking my partner and I need to take a concealed carry class soon and get a gun. We have been talking about it for years, and this might be the final straw. You never know. In reply to the second comment, in my opinion, guns are more dangerous to us than helpful. I understand the rationale behind people who want to arm themselves or concealed carry, but I know too many people who have died by suicide that way to want to encourage gun ownership among trans people generally. OP, that is a good point. Suicide in relation to owning a gun is something my partner and I have talked about almost every time we discuss getting a gun. Safety procedures will certainly need to be in place. I appreciate your point of view. Furthermore, I am not going to lie. We are scared for you guys living in the US. We live in the EU, so we are safe for now, but the far right, and to be honest, some anti-woke normal liberal parties, the European far-right liberal parties are like the US Republicans, and the conservatives are even worse, take after the US when it comes to attitudes towards identity politics. So we are also scared that this might spread to the EU, especially if Trump wins. OP, that is an interesting take. I have not considered how far-right stuff is in the EU. To a lot of Americans, it seems like a liberal utopia. In reply to the third comment, a lot of Americans are ignorant of the realities in Europe. Progressive states in the US are some of the best places in the entire world to be trans, and many parts of the EU have laws that are hostile. OP, I appreciate the insight. I will read more about that to educate myself. Additionally, Eastern Europe especially is rapidly descending into authoritarianism. The Mediterranean countries have an unsettlingly prominent amount of hard-right influence because of the sheer prevalence of xenophobia and people refusing to accommodate crisis migrants. Even the liberal bastions, like urban Germany and Scandinavia, can be very selective in who benefits from their more pro-social tendencies and who gets to be scapegoats. The Acela Corridor and the Bay Area probably truly are among the safest places in the world to be LGBTQ. Both of them are uniquely fault-tolerant in this regard because they represent such overwhelmingly powerful majorities of the economic engine of the country. They will likely become mutually supportive rogue states and let the interior of the country suffocate if some kind of absolute fascist nightmare scenario were to happen here. But that is also because the bar in the rest of the world is so incredibly low. In reply to the fourth comment, we live in Denmark, and I can second this selectiveness. Because our healthcare is taxpayer financed, the agency controlling medicine and the agency controlling other treatments are very conservative with what treatments they allow in general, but especially with niche areas as they are not allotted much money. For example, my girlfriend did not bank her semen for having biological children because of her mental state when she started hormones. If we were to ever try for that, there is no treatment allowed to help her regain fertility. As she would have to stop hormones, her contact with the hospital for hormones would stop and they would discharge her. When she would want to start hormones again, she would have to be re-referred and start waiting all over again. The waiting time for getting your hormones is currently 2 years. Do not even get me started on what surgeries they allow and the waiting time on those. I believe the waiting time for transfem bottom surgery from when you sign up for surgery, if you meet the requirements, till you're on the table is about 10 years. Additionally, I live in one of the bluest states in the country, which is something I am incredibly glad about. But I am frankly terrified of a Trump win, and especially of the possibility of the Heritage Foundation 2025 plan thing coming to pass because they are looking to explicitly come after LGBTQ+ rights on a national scale. One of their stated goals is to outlaw pornography and classify essentially any discussion of transness or gender identity as pornographic. I am praying that the debate is a wake-up call for the Democratic Party. And frankly, I am really glad that I have a skill set that would make emigrating relatively easy. OP, I am very worried about Project 2025. My partner and I are thinking of getting married if Trump gets elected. Like, the next day or something. Just to have that marriage, even if the right becomes revoked. Furthermore, I have a trans wife and son and fortunately live in New Mexico, which is passing laws to make it a safer place for our family. That being said, we are finding grassroots support for ourselves and others and working with Pink Haven Coalition to set up a safety net for trans families who need to move here, but also be in touch with an organization that has a plan if the worst happens so we can get the hell out. OP, thank you for sharing. We live in one of the most liberal cities in North Carolina, but want to get out of the state in the coming years. Maybe even sooner. Lastly, people transitioned during the first Trump presidency, and they will transition during the second one. Putting your life on hold until US politics is good for trans people just means your life will be on hold forever. There is no place without rising anti-trans politics right now. It sucks, but that is the situation. There is no place that is going to feel 100% safe to transition. So you might as well transition as is and at least live an authentic life. OP, he is literally talking about there only being 2 genders, making it illegal to be anything else besides the gender you are assigned at birth. This is not about policy, it is about control. When he says he is going to do something, believe him. This fascist movement has plans to send people to camps. How well did it go the last time fascism started rounding up people? I am not trying to be all doom and gloom, but this is not hyperbole. Read Project 2025. It is not just about Trump, it will be implemented no matter who leads the GOP. I grew up Republican, and this party does not represent any of the values they claim to have. If you value democracy and want to keep our community safe, vote Democrat all down the ballot. I would completely understand if people want to see how the election goes before transitioning. Maybe taking HRT on a low dose can help alleviate the dysphoria. Top comments. Firstly, the whole issue that people do not seem to understand when it comes to Trump is that minorities are very afraid of this man. It makes perfect sense that we are because he has already persecuted one kind of minority, that being immigrants. I can very much see him doing much more to harm other minorities such as black people, Mexicans, transgender folks, and the rest of the LGBTQ community. Project 2025 is a very scary thing that could become a reality, and if it does, I fully understand why your partner would not want to transition. As a trans man myself, I share these fears. OP, thank you for understanding his perspective. He and I are very afraid of a Trump presidency. Trump and his supporters want to terrorize minority people of all demographics. We have experienced very poor situations in life where we have been mistreated for being a queer couple. It was very hard on us and borderline traumatizing. I want him to medically transition on his own terms and will support him however possible. And of course, he is already man enough for me. A reply to OP, I understand the fear as my girlfriend and I are currently in a red state that does not support LGBTQ except for in very few select areas of our state. I try my absolute hardest every time we go out in public to pass as much as physically possible because the last thing I want to happen is for me or her to get hurt or worse just because we love one another. It really is a reality that I think a lot of people do not realize happens. Just because you do not see it on the news every day does not mean it is not happening to people, you know? Additionally, we live in a very blue area, but since day one I have asked my wife to carry a concealed weapon for protection. Secondly, we both work great jobs from home, so relocating would not be an issue financially. She has not decided on name changes yet, nor is she out publicly to many people and is still presenting as cisgender, but I guess that the election will determine our next steps. Furthermore, I am not going to lie, we are scared for you guys living in the US. We live in the EU, so we are safe for now, but the far right, and to be honest, some anti-woke normal liberal parties, the European far-right liberal parties are like the US Republicans, and the conservatives are even worse, take after the US when it comes to attitudes towards identity politics. So we are also scared that this might spread to the EU, especially if Trump wins. OP. That is an interesting take. I have not considered how far-right stuff is in the EU. To a lot of Americans, it seems like a liberal utopia. A reply to the third comment. A lot of Americans are ignorant of the realities in Europe. Progressive states in the US are some of the best places in the entire world to be trans, and many parts of the EU have laws that are hostile. OP, I appreciate the insight. I will read more about that to educate myself. Additionally, I am not going to lie. My anxiety is through the roof, and I have been unemployed, struggling with the idea that my existence might become outlawed in this country. I have spoken to my roommate half-jokingly about potentially having to seek asylum in Canada if Trump wins. It is a rough time. As a partner, I think you are doing a great job staying actively aware of the harsh realities of what is happening while also supporting and being there for your partner. I am sure it is a huge comfort to have you there validating his experience. I know in my own life, the most frustrating thing for me is being told that I am being dramatic by cisgender heterosexual folks who have a lot less to lose in this election. You sound like an amazing person to be in his life right now during such a difficult time. OP, yes, I am really anxious too. I think about it every day, but I try to push it out of my mind so I can do my work. It is so upsetting when cisgender heterosexual people do not care about the election. It matters for all, but especially minority groups. They need to have some empathy. I am a cisgender, white, female, so I have privilege of my own. I do have autism, but I am able to work and do schooling with little professional support. I try to influence my co-workers and others to no avail. Furthermore, I am honestly concerned for the both of us. I am a non-binary lesbian married to my male-to-female partner. I am also sterilized, and we are both child-free. Her egg cracked after we got married, and she has been on hormones for a year now. She even started progesterone not too long ago. We would not have enough money to move anywhere if we had to, and it does not seem like she would want to escape anywhere. I think she told me she would stop hormones if she is not able to get them anymore. But I personally want to find a way to keep her on them if they become inaccessible. Of course, I do not want to risk her safety in any way, and I will always see her as a woman no matter what, but I just want to do whatever it takes for her, you know? Like, would there even be ways to still get them or make them somehow? But regardless of what happens, I will defend her and protect her with my life. She is my soulmate and has been since we first met. After 56 years of searching, my dad's biological parents were finally reunited with him through a Christmas gift DNA test surprise. Original post, June 5, 2024. I'm not sure this is the place to post this, but I just want to get my excitement out somewhere, so I figured that this counts as getting it off my chest. Shout out to r/, who helped me discover this subreddit. As you would expect from the title, my dad, 56 years old, was adopted at birth. He was raised in Eastern Canada and never really searched for his birth parents. The people who raised him are his parents to him, and he loves them very much. They have always been amazing grandparents to my sister, 19 years old, and me, 22 years old. All he had from his birth parents was a letter which told him he was born out of love, but they could not support him when he was born. So when my sister decided to get him a genetic test for Christmas, it was purely with the intention to find out what ethnicity we all are. And the thought of finding his birth parents didn't even cross our minds. Eventually, when we got his results, we were surprised to find the names of two people with perfect genetic matches to my dad. He had the option to reach out to them, so he wrote them each an email and just waited for their responses. Almost immediately, his biological dad, who I'll call Jim, not his real name, responded. He said how excited and happy he was to have found my dad and how he was looking for him for so long. My dad, who is usually an emotionally reserved man, was curled up on the couch grinning as he was texting Jim for the first time. I was still in shock from the news, but was so happy to see my dad, even happier than when I graduated university. Soon thereafter, he also received a message from his biological mom, Debbie, not her real name. By talking to them both, my dad learned the story of his birth, and I think that it's absolutely wild. Debbie is the daughter of an Australian mining engineer, and they all moved to Canada for his work when she was in high school. Later on they moved to the Midwest, where she met Jim at the age of 17. They were high school sweethearts and were thinking of marriage after they graduated, but then Debbie got pregnant. This being the 60s, this was a huge deal. Her dad was furious and sent her back to Canada to give birth and arranged a private adoption, as he knew of a couple who were trying to have a kid, my grandparents. Once she gave birth, she was able to let Jim know that she was being sent back to Australia. They never saw each other again for the next 40 years. Jim apparently was only able to move on once he received a letter over 5 years later from Debbie, saying that she got married. Eventually, he got married too and they moved to the West Coast, but his wife got into a terrible car crash and lost the use of both legs and one arm, so they were never able to have kids. Debbie had 3 daughters in Australia, the oldest of which is 7 years younger than my dad. They saw each other for the first time around 12 years ago as they reconnected on Facebook, and Debbie happened to be taking a trip to the west coast of America. Both Jim and Debbie had always wanted to keep my dad, and so they tried for decades to find him. But my province apparently is one of the hardest places in the world to find adoption information, especially since my dad only received his birth certificate at his baptism. So their names were not on it. Jim had essentially given up trying to find my dad until genetic tests became popular. He asked Debbie to take every single one, and he did the same, about 5 years ago, in the hopes that one day my dad would take one. When he received my dad's message, he immediately wrote to Debbie, "I found him." Since then, we have had several calls with Jim and his wife, and they are absolutely lovely. We are their only family since they don't have kids, and I couldn't be happier. At the end of the month, we'll be flying to the West Coast to meet them. It has been harder to talk to Debbie as Australia is so many hours ahead of us, but she also is so kind and an absolute joy to talk to. I haven't met my 3 new aunts yet, but apparently one lives in London. It's crazy to think that I might have been within a few kilometers of her the few times I visited. I also have 5 new younger cousins. A couple of them are huge fans of Japanese culture, so they're ecstatic to hear that they have half Japanese cousins. My mom is Japanese Canadian, so my sister and I are both half. We hope to visit them one day in Australia, but we might all meet up in Japan next year. I don't know how to end this. I am still processing everything. It's absolutely incredible to have my family grow so much, but also a little overwhelming. I'm so happy for my dad, for Jim, and for Debbie, and I'm so excited to get to know them better. I hope I get to meet my new cousins soon too. I feel so incredibly lucky that this happened, seemingly against all odds. My dad was initially raised Francophone, so it's a miracle that they even speak the same language. Anyways, thank you so much for taking the time to read through this, and my apologies for how long this post ended up being. I might post an update after I meet Jim and his wife. I hope you all have a wonderful day. Highlight comments. A user shared a heartwarming story, saying, "I love stories like this. Congratulations on your bonus family. My husband found out and met a brother he didn't know about. His mom had a baby with her college sweetheart and gave him up for adoption. Later, she had my husband and his sister. About 9 years ago, the brother got in touch with us. We met him, his wife, and their adult daughter. They are great people. We see them when we can. We live in separate parts of the country and keep up by phone, Zoom, etc. The entire extended family has welcomed them, and they are always included in family reunions and other gatherings. They are a great bonus family, and we love them," another user commented. "It brought me joy to read your story. Those DNA kits are amazing, aren't they? I'm honestly not sure if I found my recent 4 5 generations, ancestral history more fascinating, or those going back to more ancient times. There are free sites you can join and upload your DNA kit. Ancestry allows the file download, and others that I forget, that trace your DNA markers back thousands of years. Mine identified multiple royal houses from medieval times and earlier, as well as ancient native chiefs that I shared genetic markers with. It's truly incredible the information you can find from that little saliva sample. More than 20 years ago, I started trying to help my dad find his biological father. Prior to that, he had always told me we had no relatives with our last name because his father was a mystery who had only passed on his genetics and name. His mother wouldn't talk about him, and all my dad ever knew was that his father had left him, his mother, and his 2 siblings when my dad was 4, more than likely leaving other children they didn't know about. He had turned up about 4 hours away 16 years later with a phone call to my grandmother, wanting to know if he could return to town without problems, assuming he meant child support. The call didn't go well. Aside from that, all he knew was this man's full name and birth date. Long story short, between internet searches and finally doing ancestry DNA, I managed to locate 2 of his daughters, neither of whom knew of each other or their other half-siblings, my grandfather's half-siblings, including one great-aunt with whom I bonded very strongly, and also figured out the lost truth of who my grandfather's birth parents were. The DNA results led me to the identity of his mother, whom nobody could ever determine before, and the fact that his paternal grandparents had raised him. Even more interesting was learning that the last name we had inherited from him wasn't even an ancestral name, but given as a result of an illegal name change. Wild stuff that made a lot makes more sense. Despite discovering all of this and making the connections with family who had known him, he was just as much a ghost to them as he was to us. I was praying to find him before he passed, fearing he would be alone, possibly even unidentified, as we had heard rumors that he had been homeless. I searched death records too. It was almost a year ago that I finally found him. The great-aunt with whom I had bonded so strongly, despite being twice my age, was also researching our genealogy, and she would periodically send me a bunch of emails with files and records. One day, it hit me that I hadn't heard from her in a while, not since she had sent a bunch of emails I had yet to look at. I had forgotten about them. Sadly, I also discovered that day that she had passed away. I had no idea, but she did share something that led to me finding my grandfather within hours. Unfortunately, what I found was an unclaimed box of remains and belongings that had been sitting in the basement of a county clerk's office, nearly 12 years after he passed. I was too late, but I still went and brought him home, where he should have been. I tell this story. Apologies for the length. I did shorten it as much as I really could, because I feel it's important for us to discover our roots and the stories of our ancestors. They're honestly fascinating. All of the people who knew the truth in my family either passed or weren't talking, but those truths are still out in the open. My dad knows who his people were, finally, and we've built wonderful relationships with most of those who are still living. Only a small few have opted not to extend their family to include us, and that's okay. In response, another user replied, "Wow, that's an incredible family story. I'm very happy that you managed to find people that you connected with so much, but I am very sorry that you didn't find your grandfather in time. Still, it must feel very good to have closure and know so much more about your family's history." Jim has done a lot of genealogy, so we found out we're descended from British and Scottish settlers who fought in the American Revolution. Beyond that, we're not so sure. My grandmother on my dad's side is descended from the Filles du Roi, who were some of the first women to come to New France, so in that way we feel very Quebecois even if we're not genetically so. My mom's family came over from Japan 100 years ago, but it's much harder to find documents from there since we can't read them, and they're not as common on ancestry sites. Thank you very much for your contribution, and I hope you have a great time with your new family. Update, July 1st, 2024. First of all, thank you so much to everyone who left such kind and heartfelt comments on my first post. It's incredible hearing all of your stories. To those who were concerned that we would abandon my grandparents that I grew up with, that is most definitely not the case. They were the people I grew up with, and I absolutely love them to bits. Although only my grandmother is still with us. All the incredible times I've had with her growing up are so much more important than blood, and I can't comprehend the stories I read where people forget about their adoptive parents or grandparents when they find their biological ones. I won't recap my previous post here because I'm lazy, haha. We just got back from visiting Jim and his wife, whom I'll call Mary, not her real name, on the West Coast, and it was one of the best experiences of my life. We spent a week in their city and got to experience so much with them. Our first time meeting them in person was very emotional and felt surreal. We spent the whole day looking through my dad's and our old photos, basically catching Jim up on everything he missed over the past 56 years. We also got to see so many of his and Mary's old photos too, which was very cool. We went to a park near their house, and on the walk, I heard Jim whisper my son, with a massive smile on his face. Throughout the week, we explored their city and saw so many cool sights and tried so much delicious food. Mary knows her city so well, and it was great to see her favorite spots all around the city, from food carts to gardens to museums. We all went to an incredible Japanese-American museum, and Jim and Mary absolutely loved it. They were very keen to learn about the internment during World War II and said they knew a bit about it before, but now it feels so personal. We went on 2 hikes with Jim. Mary wasn't able to come because she is in a wheelchair. It's so cool to have such an active and outdoorsy grandfather who can go on such long hikes. He taught us some foraging tips and told us stories from when he used to camp for years on end. Both he and Mary are very spiritual, so he also told us great stories from meditation retreats they've done. He's even tried psychedelics, so he's definitely the cool grandpa. I won't go into precise details of places we went to, but it was great exploring such a cool part of the world with amazing people. We were all very sad when the trip was over and we had to leave. I've gained 2 new grandparents on the West Coast, and I couldn't be happier. And they said that they've gained 2 grandchildren. I'm so glad that they see us as such. Mary told me her greatest regret in life was not being able to have children and grandchildren, but now she does. This has been such a transformative time in our lives, and I think it's incredible just how many people are so much happier now because my sister just happened to get my dad a DNA test. This is just the beginning of our relationship with our new grandparents, and I am so excited. Now we have to figure out a way to go to Australia to meet Debbie. Whenever that happens, maybe I'll make another update. Until then, I hope you all have a lovely day, and thank you so much for taking the time to read our story highlighted comments. Firstly, one commenter shared, "It's kind of surprising how distant a relationship with someone will show up in a DNA test. I didn't have any surprises with my close family, but finding 3rd and 4th cousins on my mom's side helped confirm some potentially shaky genealogy research I'm working on for her family. She was a product of her mother's 4th marriage. 2 of the previous ones we had no idea about, so she has siblings she didn't know existed, and they were abandoned by her father when she was a kid, so I didn't really grow up with any connection to them. Trying to piece together the timeline of her parents' lives has been difficult. DNA connections confirmed a lot of things I would have otherwise discarded as improbable." Another commenter advised, "I'd recommend putting some serious thought into whether it's worth giving these companies your data because once you do, you have zero control over where it ends up or what it gets used for. There have already been some massive breaches, and that sort of data could end up affecting more than just you." Lastly, one shared a personal story. "Honestly, go for it because you never know. Less happy story, but my mom is adopted and took a genetic test mostly for fun and wanting health history since she is getting older. After a year, she got pinged on one with a young man who turned out to be her nephew. From there, she found a half-sister and we learned my mom's biological dad never even knew about my mom. From what we understand, he was dating a girl in college, but they broke up when he decided to study abroad. She learned she was pregnant during this time and must have just never told him. She had my mom, gave her up and everyone moved on. Her biological dad still refuses to believe it. My mom wasn't looking for family, but she said it still stings a bit. She does sometimes talk to her half-sister though. My ex-husband left when I was pregnant with twins. Now, he suspects I cheated and demands a paternity test for my children. My ex-husband and I have 3 children. It was a difficult split as he left while I was pregnant with our twins and he tried to make everything as difficult as possible. He and his wife are wanting me to do a paternity test on the children as they are disputing that our youngest is his and he no longer wants to pay child support for her. Him wanting to reduce his child support has been an ongoing issue. For the last 5 years, he hasn't had a problem regarding the paternity of any of our children. He's now stating that he doesn't think that our daughter is his and that I have cheated because she doesn't look like him. She doesn't look much like me either, She's got green eyes like I do. Both of us are pale with light-colored hair and eyes. Our daughter has dark hair that is thick and curly. She looks mixed race, and she's the only one who looks this way. Her twin brother looks like my ex-husband. My daughter looks like my grandmother, who was mixed race and was white passing. I'll be honest that he and his wife do not get along. I mean, it is hard to get along with the woman who your husband left you for. She keeps trying to shove herself in my children's lives and acting like their mom. She keeps insisting that she's mama, and they should refer to her as that. They have refused to call her that, which always ends at my ex calling me frustrated that the children won't give her respect. She's recently been pointing out that my youngest looks darker than her siblings and has been suggesting that my youngest isn't my ex-husband's. I'm close with my former SIL, ex's brother's wife, and she told me before my ex did that he wanted a paternity test and was going to stop paying child support for her. She's also said that ex and his wife are once again having money issues. This was something I had already suspected, as he had stopped taking them on his weekends as he was having to work overtime. Before people tell me to document this, I have everything documented. I refuse to answer calls from him, which forces him to either text or email me so that I can keep conversation records, as I don't trust him. After I found out about him wanting a paternity test, I told him that I wasn't going to consent to him doing a paternity test on the children, and the only way he was getting one is if he took me to court. He told me that it was clear our daughter wasn't his and that she didn't look like her siblings. He argued that he couldn't afford court and I was holding his money hostage by forcing him to pay for a child who isn't his. He has now apparently been whining about me on Facebook about how I cheated on him and am forcing him to raise another man's child, and forced him to sign the birth certificate. I didn't, he wasn't even there, but as we were still married I could put him on without him being there. I don't follow him. I had one of his friends try and confront me about it. I want my children to have a relationship with their dad, and I feel like this is stopping them. Though on the other hand, I know there will be something else he, or his wife, takes issue with down the line. AITA for refusing to do a paternity test. Edit. I thought I'd put this in my post, but I didn't. Really should have proofread this rather than posting in anger. My ex wants me to pay for the paternity test. He doesn't want to because of his financial situation, which is why I told him to take it to court and get a court-mandated one. I know if I was to pay for it, then he would want another one because he'll think that I tampered with it as I paid for it. He did the same when I had the house valued so I could give him half. He didn't like what the first person valued it at, so had to get another. I know I haven't cheated on him and she is his. I know some didn't like me referring to her as my youngest. Both her and her brother don't like being referred to as twins or as one, so I don't refer to them as such. Since they were toddlers, they have been very independent from each other and want to be treated as such. She is not my only daughter. My eldest is also a girl. Update. So I did not expect so many comments on my last post. After I posted in my frustration over the paternity test situation, my ex-husband, we'll call him Jim, and his wife kept trying to get me to consent to and pay for the paternity test. I refused to pay because I know Jim. When the result isn't what he wants, he will accuse me of tampering with the results. When I kept saying no, they ran to whoever would listen, complaining about me and how I was forcing them to pay for a child that wasn't Jim's. For those who may not have read my last post, the child in question is my youngest daughter and a twin. Jim does not contest that her twin brother is his. But apparently, along with being a bitch over this, I'm also a cat. News to me. Honestly, I didn't think he was that much of an idiot, but here we are. Jim kept complaining to his dad, Mick, and brother about me and how I was being financially abusive by taking money from him for a child that wasn't his and refusing to pay for the paternity test. Now Mick and I get on very well. He adores his grandchildren. They also adore him. And I have never attempted to stop them having a relationship, unlike Jim, who often attempts to weaponize the children. I get on very well with Jim's family and we are close. His SIL, his brother's wife, and I are very close. She's the sister I never had. Only child problems. Mick asked if he was to pay for a paternity test, if I would allow it to happen. Mick explained that he wasn't accusing me of anything, but he was fed up with seeing Jim and his wife drag me every chance they got. He understood why I was refusing and agreed with me. I agreed, but stated that Jim should choose the company that the paternity test is done through, and I didn't want to know which one was chosen. That way I wasn't involved. So we had the paternity test. Mick paid for all 3 children to be tested and had them tested with the private company Jim chose and then a private company Mick's lawyer recommended. Mick explained he did this so that if Jim started arguing against the results, calling them fake, then Mick had another set to back them up. And what do you know? All 3 children are Jim's. Since we've gotten the results, Jim has tried arguing that they're wrong and that youngest definitely isn't his. He has also been taking to Facebook to complain about me and is threatening to take me to court for fraud. The man couldn't afford to pay for a paternity test. He definitely can't afford a lawyer to take me to court, but I'd like to see him try. Former SIL has been screenshotting some of his comments and sending them over to me, which we've been having a giggle over, especially since one of the things Jim has whining about is finding out I've been dating a former friend of his. I say former because he, along with some others, were cut out by Jim's wife. Jim's upset because I'm alienating him from the children by dating someone new, coming from the man who left me when I was pregnant for his now wife, who keeps trying to insist she is mama to my children. My children only met my boyfriend for the first time this weekend, after we had been dating for a year. Before people jump to Jim's defense and claim I'm alienating him, I've never stopped him seeing or communicating with the children. He's the one that decides when he's interested in being their dad. So yeah, unsurprisingly my children are Jim's. Jim's still an idiot. The children are happy as they're off to have a sleepover at their granddad's with cousins, while I get to have wine and spend the evening catching up with former Sil. Jim and his wife are still mouthing off on social media, but it's falling on deaf ears for the most part. Relevant comments. Comment 1, he left when you were pregnant with twins but doesn't believe the youngest is his. I didn't read past that because that doesn't make sense to me. Wouldn't the twins then be the youngest? OP, that's correct. She is the younger of my twins. Comment 2, so he thinks only one of the twins isn't his? OP, yep, he only thinks one of the twins is his. I wish I could explain why he thinks that, but he was never the smartest. Am I stupid for wanting to forgive and move on with our lives after my wife announced at her sister's wedding that she slept with the best man? My wife informed me at her sister's wedding that she had slept with the best man. The timing is crucial here. We have been married for 3 years and were together as a couple for 2 years before that, making it a total of about 5 years. 2 weekends ago, her sister got married and naturally, my wife was part of the wedding party. As expected, she spent the 2 weeks before the wedding helping her sister with all the preparations. It was no big deal, she kept me updated, and I knew this was going to happen. She took that Wednesday to Friday off work to assist her sister and stayed with her for 3 days. I certainly know her sister, but I barely know the guy who is now my brother-in-law. In fact, I have only met him a few times, but he seems nice enough. I showed up Saturday morning a few hours before the ceremony, hoping to steal a few minutes to see her. Not wanting to intrude on the day since I knew she was busy, but I hadn't seen her since Tuesday. She saw me outside her parents' house and sent her brother out to tell me that she would come out and see me in the car, which I thought was odd, but whatever. She finally came out, sat in the seat next to me and gave me a kiss. Instead of acting happy to see me, she told me that she had to talk to me and didn't want to ruin her sister's day. She informed me that at the reception, if I still wanted to go, I might hear some things about her and the best man, and she didn't want it to be awkward or weird. I just kind of sat there stunned. She explained that about 4 years ago she had a fling with him, and while it didn't mean anything, she knew that I'm somewhat jealous by nature and wanted me to know in advance so that if I heard something, I wouldn't be surprised. Again, I just kind of sat there. This was not how I thought my morning would go, but I told her I appreciated knowing it and that it certainly wasn't a big deal now. She went back into the house, and I went to eat lunch and decided to meet her at the church. As I was eating and checking my phone, a realization hit me. She mentioned having a fling with him 4 years ago, yet we have been together for 5 years. Initially, I wanted to dismiss it, thinking she might have just made a mistake with the timeline, but the more I thought about it, the more memories started coming back to me. About a year and a half into our relationship, she went through a phase where her behavior was quite suspicious. She wasn't available when she usually would be and went on 2 weekend camping trips with friends from work. Naturally, this made me feel uneasy, but I knew I had a long day ahead and tried to push those thoughts aside. I arrived at the wedding and watched everything unfold. After the ceremony, there was a line where guests walked by to congratulate the bride and groom, with the wedding party standing in line as well. My wife was standing next to a guy I didn't know, but the best man was also there. I walked down the line, acting like everything was fine. At the reception, it took a long time for the wedding party to arrive due to the photo session. When my wife finally got there and sat with me, I chose not to mention anything, not wanting to create a distraction on such an important day. However, instead of leaving it be, she informed me that each groomsman and bridesmaid would be dancing together, and she would be dancing with the best man. I asked why, given that she wasn't paired with him in the wedding party. She explained that the maid of honor and her partner were married and wanted to dance together. At this point, I was more than just a little irritated, but I tried to keep my feelings in check. I knew better than to drink, as I tend to get angry when intoxicated. She chatted with everyone around her, and then the time for the dance arrived. The best man came over, extended his arm, and she got up to dance with him. I made a conscious effort not to watch them and focused on other things instead. When she returned with him, they were laughing and joking like the best of friends. She decided to introduce us, and while I didn't tell him to get lost as I felt like doing, my greeting was probably less than friendly. However, this did not stop him from sitting down and talking with her for a few minutes. The more they chatted and reminisced about the past, the angrier I became. Eventually, I got up and went to the bathroom, and when I came back, he was gone. She chose that moment to tell me that she thought I was being rude, which was the last thing I wanted to hear. I told her that this wasn't the appropriate time or place for this discussion, but we would definitely talk later. She then said she was going to change clothes, and as soon as she returned, she was planning to tell her sister that we were leaving because I had ruined her day. However, she didn't want me to ruin her sister's day as well. I assured her that I was perfectly capable of not causing any trouble for her or her sister for the rest of the day and that I did not want to create any drama, so I preferred to stay. She went to change clothes and came back looking annoyed. Understand? I had not said a word to her, and I even shook the other guy's hand. I guess I just looked miserable, which is what she based her reaction on. She was adamant about not staying, so I said that if she really wanted to leave, we could go. But if she preferred to stay, I would be happy to stay too, or if she liked, I could leave since I had my own car. Initially, she said we should stay, but then she changed her mind and said if I couldn't behave better, I should leave. I asked how I was acting, and she said it was clear I was trying to act like a silverback gorilla ready for a fight. I didn't know whether to laugh at her or be offended. I went back inside and sat down while she mingled with the other guests. I talked with her brother for a while, but eventually ended up back at our table talking with her grandma. We left at the same time, and I arrived home just before she did. I was sitting in the living room waiting for her when she came in, and she did not beat around the bush. I simply asked her to retell me the story about this other guy, and she repeated it word for word as before. After sitting and looking at her for a while, I asked if she was sure about the time frame, and she confirmed she was. I then reminded her that we had been together for 5 years, so this fling was well over a year into our relationship. What happened next is hard to describe. Instead of being flustered or denying it, she simply said she knew. So I asked her to explain, and she told me that they worked together and it was just a physical thing. She felt that we weren't in a great place at the time, and she never had any feelings for him or any real intention of leaving me. She was just having some fun for a few weekends. She admitted that it was probably a mistake on her part to tell me now, but she didn't want me to be blindsided. I did not react the way she anticipated. We had a huge argument, which ended when she accused me of being childish about the whole situation. She insisted that because we are now married, what happened before our marriage shouldn't affect our current life together. I vehemently disagree. First, her infidelity affects us profoundly, and she doesn't even show any remorse. Second, I despise being called childish when I get upset. It feels like she's trying to assert superiority over me. I told her I needed time to process everything, but she dismissed it, claiming there was nothing to think about since we love each other and this doesn't change anything. That conversation happened 2 weeks ago and I'm still not over it. She has been trying to talk to me over the past few days, but I find myself unable to see her the same way. Part of me thinks it's irrational to be this upset over something that happened years ago, but another part of me is deeply hurt by the revelation of her infidelity. Update. At her sister's wedding, my wife told me she had slept with the best man. The maid of honor, not my wife, was married to the groomsman who walked my wife down the aisle. Some people speculated that my wife was trying to arrange the dance, but I know for certain that part was genuine. However, this doesn't mean she didn't offer to let them dance or engage in other manipulative behavior. I wanted to clarify that part. Recent developments have only made my decision-making process more difficult. Last week, I felt mostly angry, but as the weekend went on, I became more sad. I want to hate her and flip the switch that tells me I'm being taken advantage of, but it's tough because I still love her, and this situation is tearing me apart. Here's what happened next. She eventually realized that I wasn't going to simply get over this, which made her understand that I might want to leave the marriage. This realization almost caused her to have a nervous breakdown. Someone from my first post suggested she might try to manipulate me, and I took that warning to heart. Initially, I thought she was shedding crocodile tears, but it soon became clear that she wasn't faking. She was having a real panic attack. This led to an emergency room visit, an overnight hospital stay, new medications, and a follow-up appointment with her doctor next week. Her family got involved, leading to lengthy discussions all around. When we got home with her family, I asked what she wanted to do, given the full house. She said she wanted to be with her mom for a while, which was fine with me as I had no desire to spend the day with her dad or sister. So I decided to finish up some work and return home later. 2 hours after I arrived, I got a text from her, pleading for me to come home and saying she desperately needed to talk. So I wrapped up what I was doing and headed back. When I got to my front porch, her dad was there, asking if he could have a word with me. Already feeling quite angry, I was prepared to confront him if she had filled him with lies. While we weren't best friends, I had never had any issues with him, so I wasn't keen on being the one who broke his daughter's heart. We sat down on the deck chairs, and his opening statement completely caught me off guard. I expected anything but what he said next. He revealed that she had told them what had happened and he wanted to apologize to me because he felt like he had failed as a parent. He believed that her mindset was largely influenced by her mother. Although he loved both of them, he admitted they were wrong. He had warned his wife years ago that teaching their daughters that anything before marriage didn't count was a terrible idea and a flawed value system. He clarified that he wasn't defending his daughter's actions but wanted me to understand that she genuinely believed marriage was an entirely separate chapter of life. He said her mom and dad had romanticized marriage so much that she struggled to grasp the realities of life. Essentially, he was placing some blame on his wife, but this was far from what I anticipated. We shook hands, and he told me that no matter what I decided, he still held me in high regard, which genuinely made me feel better for the moment. I then went inside, and my wife was curled up in a ball on her mom's lap, and you could tell she had been crying the entire time I had been gone. Her mom got up, came, hugged me, and told me she was sorry and that she loved me and was praying that we could work this out. My wife was laid out on the couch at this point. Her mom and dad left, and she sat there looking at me and crying. Okay, this is where I'm going to piss off everybody and just tell you that I couldn't take it. I went to her, and we hugged for a long time with her telling me over and over how sorry she was. Hey, I know it was the weak thing to do, but again, I have to say in my defense that just before this incident occurred, I loved her with all of my heart and would have done anything to not see her in pain. Whatever she had done, I still didn't want to see her like that. Look, it's very possible that she was putting on an Oscar-worthy acting job, but I don't honestly think so. She really seemed broken at that point in time. After a while, when she calmed down, I asked her what she wanted me to come home and talk about, and she said she wanted to get everything out in the open so I didn't feel like I was being lied to or manipulated. She wanted me to ask her questions, and I wish I had written down a list, but I came up with a few off the top of my head. She was brutally honest with me, and some of the questions I asked I probably shouldn't have because now the mental image is stuck in there, but honestly, it was there anyway. I just now have confirmation. First, I asked for dates or at the very least approximate dates. I didn't tell her about the engagement concern I had because I didn't want her to change stories, and she remembered exactly when they occurred. Fortunately, this happened a little earlier in our relationship than she told me initially, so we were not engaged when this happened. I can't tell you what a relief that was because I became physically ill when I thought about that when someone said it in my last post. Second, I asked how many times she went overboard with this because instead of just telling me how many different dates, she decided to tell me how many times there was intimacy. She wasn't doing it to be mean. She honestly thought that is what I wanted to know. This part of the conversation did not help me at all and, in fact, almost broke me down. In truth, it wasn't that often, and in fact, there were really only 3 different days that it happened on, but there were several times during those 3 days. Then came the difficult part that was understanding why she did it. Admittedly, I'm not the most masculine man, and it pains me to say this, but I couldn't ask without breaking down into tears. I questioned why I wasn't enough, why she chose him, and why she didn't just leave me. At that moment, it was her turn to comfort me because everything hit me all at once. Her confession, witnessing their interactions, and now learning the details of their affair. She spoke during this, but I couldn't process her words. I was too upset, and honestly, nothing she could say would make a difference. After regaining my composure, I told her that the betrayal was terrible, but her reaction when I found out was just as bad, if not worse. She agreed and apologized for calling me immature. She genuinely believed that it wouldn't matter to me now because we were married. Hearing this made my blood boil again. I was about to respond, but she interrupted, saying that after discussing with her parents, she realized how wrong she was and acknowledged that cheating is cheating. However, she still felt that the happiness we shared since getting married should mean something. I responded that I felt like that happiness was built on a lie. This led to another breakdown for her, nearly resulting in another ER visit, but between Ativan and breathing into a paper bag, we managed to calm her down. I let her sleep the rest of the night, feeling emotionally exhausted myself. However, by Sunday, we were talking again. By this point, I wasn't as understanding as I had been when we returned from the ER. I told her that introducing him to me was terrible. Having to watch her dance with him was even worse, and the fact that she only confessed because she was about to get caught was the worst of all. I then asked why she thought I would find out and how many people at the wedding knew besides me. Clearly, the guy knew, but his best friend, who is now my brother-in-law, also knew. This led to her sister finding out, and she feared her sister would be the one to tell me. I asked how often she saw this guy, and she said the wedding was the first time she had seen him in 3 years. I lost my temper and asked if she met him at any point leading up to the wedding. She got defensive, acting as though she wouldn't have slept with anyone because she was married. I was so frustrated that I had to leave for a while, feeling like she was living in a completely different reality. After cooling off enough to return home and attempt to be civil, she asked what she could do to help me get past this. Although it may not sound like much, it was the first time she genuinely offered to help, so it was a nice gesture. I told her I wasn't sure what she could do or if there was anything either of us could do to fix this, and that I might never get over it. She said she wanted to help because she didn't want to see me in pain and hoped that over time, I would judge her based on who she is now. She promised to do anything I needed to work this out. She also wanted to assure me that she had been entirely faithful since we got married and would never cheat on her vows. I sarcastically thanked her, which I admit wasn't the most mature reaction. I then asked for a break from further discussions until at least Wednesday. I have 2 projects I need to complete, and honestly, I'm exhausted and unsure of what to do. I fluctuate between intense anger, where I want to kick her out, and deep emotional pain where I want to forget everything and move forward with her. Yes, I know this is not what anyone wanted to hear, and no, I'm not proud to type it, but it is what it is at the moment. I found out my daughter is pregnant. Am I a bad mom for refusing to raise the soon-to-be-born child of my non-binary daughter? My daughter came to me at 16 and said she was non-binary, but only sometimes. Like, some days she would feel more male than female, and some days she would feel like neither. She wanted me to ask her every day what day it was and then refer to her as that pronoun of the day. I told her that wasn't going to fly. Growing up, I spent a lot of time on LJ, LiveJournal, during the old self and Zen self days. People who think this is new to this generation are fooling themselves. I told her that I would call her the pronoun she wanted and do my best to remember it day to day, but she was going to have to tell me what she wanted for that day. I wasn't going to play a daily guessing game. This went on for about a week or 2 until she finally seemed to grow tired or bored and just said I could call her her. Though she still identifies as non-binary. Fine. At least when it was going on she wanted she, he, or they. I'm sorry, but I couldn't have done fox self/fox them with a straight face. So that's the pronoun story, and looking back where I think things started to go off the handle. Here's my real question. My daughter is now 18, pregnant, and seems to have lost her goddamn mind. Or I'm an asshole. You choose. This year has been a struggle. She wanted to take a break year before she goes to community college, but can't keep a job. Apparently, retail situations are too phobic against her non-binary state. My child looks/acts/dresses exactly as a young adult female BTW. When I ask how people are being phobic against her, she gets as prickly as a cactus, so I really don't know the details. She's been through 4 or 5 jobs this year, quit all of them. She won't consider call centers that aren't face-to-face because she doesn't like to talk on phones, and is apparently looking for a remote job without any luck. She's been unemployed since Thanksgiving. She quit her last job on Black Friday, in fact, and I was on the verge of laying down the law, telling her she either needs to go to school this upcoming semester full-time or get a full-time job or move out with her friends. But now she's come to me and she's 5 months pregnant. She's very angry at me, says it's my fault because I didn't put her on puberty-blocking hormones when she came to me 2 years ago. She believes I'm in fact trying to feminize her by getting her birth control. The pill. She's been throwing her prescription away. This is where I might be the asshole. I called her a little idiot. We don't use that sort of language in my house, and I never call people names, especially my own child, but at that moment I could just see red. The hormone thing is a non-issue IMO because this is the first time I ever heard of her wanting hormones. What was I supposed to do? Go back in time? As for birth control, it's also the first time I'm hearing anything about this. There are non-pill options that don't have estrogen. If that was her want, all she had to do was ask and I would have driven her to the doctor myself. Or she could have taken the car she has and done it. She has her own medical card even. Though to be fair, I don't know how she would have managed the copay without a job. I know for a fact her old high school gave out free condoms like candy because her friends were always giggling over flavored sample packs, and even blew a few of them up like balloons and left them around the house one time. She had all the birth control she could ever want and used none of it. It gets worse. We're way past the date of abortion. Again, I would have helped her if this had been her wish. We live in an abortion-protected state and can afford it. She's known she was pregnant for about 2 months and has come to think of her baby like a sibling. She expects me to raise it like it was mine. That this is my duty, in fact, because she says it is my refusal to accept her non-binary state that led to her being pregnant. So she was going to get a brother or sister and I was going to have another child. You can say my language grew, stirred to versions of get your head out of your ass, and congratulations mommy, you have some hard decisions to make, and I said I would absolutely not raise her baby for her. She also refused to say who the father was. Now that I've cooled down, I'm really hoping she has a secret boyfriend. She does have some friends who were born male, but now also don't identify that way. We didn't even get there as I lost my mind when she said she thinks of her own baby as a sibling and wants me to raise it like my own child. She's locked herself in her room loudly wailing, I feel like crap warmed over. She's been in there for 12 hours, and as she has an attached bathroom, probably won't be coming out until she gets hungry. Considering it's been half a day, I think she has snacks stored. I also don't know where to go from here. Being pregnant sucks and messes with your head, so I'd like to blame that and the fear she must be feeling, but I have the bad feeling I either raised a spoiled brat or someone with an emerging personality disorder. So I need to know from people who aren't emotionally involved, and maybe some people who are more in tune with this whole non-binary thing than I am. What do I do to help while also making her responsible for her own child? How can I help my daughter except she must do basically the most feminine thing you can do, give birth and possibly breastfeed, while being sensitive that she's non-binary? Am I just a big asshole here? Typing all this out, it feels like my daughter is lost in a crazy town. I'm still not raising her baby, but at what point do I drag a legal adult to the hospital? Edit. You might disagree with my choices or wording, but I'm reporting people who call this bait. It's not. Edit 2. It's the middle of the night and she has decided to pack some of her clothes and stay with one of her friends. One who I suspect is the baby daddy. Before she left, she told me that she already called the police and let them know that she was leaving of her own free will and was not in danger. Like I was going to report an 18-year-old adult as a runaway or something. It was insulting. I told her she needs to work out details if she wants to adopt with the father, and she was welcome back home when she had a plan in place. It was short because I heard her on the way out. I think she just meant to leave without saying anything. Thank you for your kind comments and advice, Reddit. I'm going to sleep. Commenters agreed that OP's child wasn't thinking straight. Comment 1. I hate to say this, but I sincerely hope OP's daughter chooses to give up this baby for adoption, because she's a confused hot-ass mess. I don't blame OP for not wanting to step on the crazy train and raise this baby. Comment 2. Let's be honest, if OP says yes to raising this child as her own, it will be the first of several. Daughter won't take BC, so she will continue to have unprotected sex and get pregnant. She decided a couple years ago that she's NB, expected her mother to understand that and know everything about it, and is now rewriting history to blame her mom for her now being pregnant. My head is swimming, and she's not my daughter. There will be more babies. Comment 3. You are so NTA. I feel sympathy for your kid because they sound like they are so confused, maybe have body dysphoria and are now facing a life-altering situation with no way out. They must feel so trapped. So they turn on you. It's easier for them to yell at and blame you instead of accepting responsibility. They are looking for a way out. We all keep changing and growing, and your kid is so young they seem to not know who they are yet, and now they have to face looking after a baby when they know deep down they can't even really take care of themselves. But my God, the thing they did that was really stupid was chucking BC away. That is actually wild. Your kid needs to learn the difference between gender-enforced stereotypes and actual biology. With biology, it unfortunately doesn't matter what gender you are. The biology doesn't care. It still works the same. They need to learn that and differentiate. Like I said, NTAOP. What a shit situation. I hope it gets better. I really do. Comment 4. NTA. Your child is in fact a little idiot, with behavior that would be an absolute nightmare had you not been their parent. Also, birth control isn't a form of feminization. It's a form of responsibility when you're born in a body with a uterus and want to have sex that can result in pregnancy. OP's response, I wish I had those words when she hit me with that one. I sort of sputtered for a few minutes. Comment 5. Oh man, this is a can of worms within itself. I wish I had better advice, but just... I feel for you in the position you are stuck in. The only thing I can think of is, referring to breastfeeding as chest feeding might make your NB daughter accept it more. But like, there's a whole other level of things you need to get through first. First and foremost, therapy, ASAP for your kid. Because she needs to get her head sorted out. Assuming you will just take this kid and raise it for her is problematic to say the least. And she's got a deadline coming obviously, so therapy ASAP. Also appointment for pregnancy checkups ASAP. Has she had any? An unmonitored pregnancy can lead to complications. You might also be able to get her a social worker to go through pregnancy checkups, birthing extra. Your kid needs a big sit-down conversation about accountability for your own actions. And about how she might feel like part of your actions lead to this. There was also many choices she could have made to prevent this, that she chose not to. And at the end of the day, it was her choices that led to this, not you. OP's response. Thanks for this tip. I've written it down. The reason I mentioned she was NB because using breast instead of chest is the exact type of thing to send her into a pissy fit when she's in the wrong mood. I know this may sound like a little thing, but she's always been, well, dramatic. Because it's the internet and things are anonymous, I'll admit that I am absolutely dreading pregnancy and afterbirth mood swings. Especially since it will all involve very womanly things in every intimate way. On top of the sheer stress of a newborn? Yes, I'm not looking forward to it at all, and I'm already preparing to endure the storms. Our conversation wasn't productive. It was an argument and she's still not out of her room, but I don't think she has had any prenatal care. That will change if I have anything to do with it. Thanks again. OP commented with some of her concerns. Yes. My worry and regret have so many places to go, and a big part of it is for the baby. This has been a bad day. Responding to a comment regarding her child's entitled attitude. Oh, believe you me, I have been kicking myself up and down on top of everything else. I don't know how she got to this point, but she's there now. I wish I did have that time travel machine she clearly expects me to have. She also clarified her overall views on the matter. I'm on the fence. If she acted at all like she didn't have a gender, I believe that's what NB is, then I could take it more seriously. But she dresses as a woman. She puts on makeup, wears dresses during the summer, enjoys feminine things. We watch horse videos on YouTube and squeal over the new foal videos. She's never been a tomboy, even. But I was like, okay, this isn't hurting her. I'll let her have this and express herself. Maybe it'll turn into something, maybe it won't. And after the first few weeks, she even dropped changing pronouns every day. Her mentioning being NB faded and then started up hard again when high school ended and she started working retail. I try to be understanding. Retail is hell, and I'd personally only work it again if I was at my last resort, but recently it does seem to be an excuse not to work, and now she has a baby on the way. This may not be the place for it, but I'm just worried she's regressing to a more childlike state. I don't know if she's struggling with being NB or if she's using NB as an excuse to shield herself from the world. I guess the internet won't know, but I'm just flat out worried. Update. This is an update to this post. Long story short, my 18-year-old NB daughter wanted me to raise her baby, and she told me she thinks of the baby as her sibling. We had a blowout. She locked herself in her room for most of a day and then took off with her friends, her lover. So this happened a few days ago, but I didn't update because I needed to get my head around it. It still doesn't make sense. Daughter finally unblocked me. She and the person who got her pregnant wanted to talk to me at a public place. We chose IHOP. Although I suspected I knew who her lover was, I was disappointed to find out because they had been a part of my daughter's friend group since high school and was the only one I ever had a problem with and kicked out of my house. They are trans now, but 2 years ago the friend group was watching a movie in the living room, and every time I'd pass by, he was a he then, would lock eyes with me and make really obnoxious, loud orgasm sounds like that scene in Harry Met Sally. I told him to knock it off and grew sterner when he did it again. Then when I was in the kitchen, he somehow snuck up behind me and was miming jack-off movements with his hand. I turned around and caught him at it. He was still fully clothed, but it was startling and freaky. I kicked him out. So now I'll just call them sperm donor because that's what they are. I'm still calling my daughter and she because I still haven't been told not to by her otherwise. So get off my case on that. Anyway, the IHOP meeting was a shit show. Sperm donor sat with my daughter and went on the attack. Sperm donor's points were, I was poisoning my daughter by making her take birth control. I only helped her get the prescription and would have done everything I could if I knew she didn't want to take the pill. There are other methods. It will take years to fix my daughter after all I did. Not giving her hormones even though I had no idea that was what she wanted. She dropped out, even wanting to change her pronouns after a few weeks. Abortion is a sin and I'm a monster for suggesting it. It's past the date anyway. I am further abusing her by not taking care of the baby while she fixes herself. I guess they meant it as a temp situation, which was also new to me. So apparently even though I'm an abusive monster, a bad mother and so on, I'm even worse for not taking in their baby. At least no one suggested that I raise it like my daughter's sister anymore. That might have been my daughter's thought on it. Sperm donor did most of the talking while my daughter just sat and glared at me, nodding along. It was kind of a whirlwind. Sperm donor pounded the table a few times, and even the waiter knew not to bother us after drinks, LOL. I'm surprised we weren't asked to leave. There was a lot said, mostly by the sperm donor who really seemed to be steering the ship. I asked why the sperm donor couldn't take care of the baby, and the sperm donor said their parents were even worse than me. I guess my daughter and sperm donor taking care of the child they created is out of the question. I told them that I would not be raising their baby for them and that adoption is the best bet. They said that if I don't agree to raise it, they'll make sure I'll never see the baby ever. I won't raise their child for them. So that's that, I guess. I feel so many flavors of worried and angry and then worried all over again. I've been around the block and it's never a great sign when the person you're with makes an enemy of your family. That's what sperm donor has done by painting me as an abuser and failed mother who also won't take in their baby. Sounds like sperm donors have cut themselves off from their own family too. So I'm worried my daughter is in a very controlling relationship with someone who convinced her to stop birth control because they think hormones are too feminizing somehow and that she needs to be fixed. But they still want me to raise their baby. I'm angry that my daughter can just hear this crap and nod along like, yeah, that makes total sense. She's not stupid. I think she's love blinded. I'm sad and worried for the baby. A couple commenters suggested I wanted nothing to do with the baby because I wouldn't agree to raise it as my own. No, in a perfect world, I would want a normal grandmotherly relationship. Or at least know that the child is safe and has been adopted into a loving family. I don't care what my daughter does with her gender or her body as long as she doesn't hurt herself. I want her to be in a happy relationship with someone who values her for who she is. Sperm donor kept using the word fix, which I see as another terrible sign. It's bad all around. My house is empty. It feels like my adult daughter has run off to join up with some weird church cult thing who tells her that up is down. That not using birth control and not getting an abortion and then expecting others to take care of the child is all A-okay. Oh, and that she's a problem and needs to be fixed. I texted her and said I would be there for her, but sperm donors was still not welcome in the house. I think I'm blocked again. She's a legal adult. I'm not sure what else I can do at this point. In my low points, part of me thinks maybe I should agree to take the baby and then immediately make sure it's adopted into a loving home. But I get the feeling that sperm donors won't make that easy, and right now my daughter does what he says. Also, I'm not sure if that plan is even possible. It sounds like Hollywood. I have an appointment to speak with a counselor, but the soonest I could get is April. Some of my friends think I should take the baby in either to get them away from the parents or because they think it's my duty, or both. The only silver lining in this was that they both seem sober. I don't think there's drugs involved. Am I reading this wrong? Am I the asshole here? Commenters agreed that sperm donor's comments made no sense, and that OP's child was probably stuck in an abusive relationship. Comment 1. For your safety, I would change the locks and put up a camera. Sperm donor seems unhinged. I'm a firm believer in better safe than sorry. Comment 2. This baby will be used as a pawn in his never-ending psychodrama. If they do not and cannot raise their baby, the best solution is adoption. Otherwise, the father will make your life a living hell. OP's response. I couldn't figure out a polite way of saying this, but yes. That is my suspicion if I take in their baby. Sperm donor implied it would be temporary, while earlier my daughter said it would be permanent. I think sperm donors will refuse to sign over paperwork when the time comes or try to leverage it in some way. Comment 3. NTA. Also, it sounds like your daughter is in an abusive relationship with this person. Sorry your daughter has been brainwashed by this crazy person. I would definitely contact this sperm donor's family, and if they seem sane, warn them about how crazy both of them spoke to you. OP's response. That is my fear, and not a bad idea to contact sperm donor's parents. This has all happened so far. I feel like I'm in shock and I'm very worried. Comment 4. Pretty wild that a trans person is saying abortion is a sin. None of this is anything like what you're going to hear from any healthy LGBT community, who are quite careful to make sure not to support people in delusional or antisocial behavior. Definitely get therapy. Sounds like your kid has some serious mental health problems if they're being influenced by whatever wackos put these ideas into their head. You're going to need support in coping with this madness. NTA by a country mile. You are in no way abusing your kid by refusing to take responsibility for their bad choices. OP's response. Thank you, and yes, I don't want to minimize my daughter's role in it, but the hard anti-abortion thing surprised me too. A lot of what they said contradicted itself. It felt like I was sitting across from two people who were in their own wacko bubble. I know it's not a LGBT thing. I wish someone from their community would knock some sense into them, if it's even possible at this point. OP left an update in a comment. I logged in and received a large amount of requests for an update. Unfortunately, I do not have one. I have not seen or heard from my daughter since the last meeting, and I believe she has changed her phone number. Our community isn't a large one, and I have heard through the grapevine she is staying with a sperm donor in one of the homeless camps out in the woods. As this is a haven for drugs and sex trafficking, this is a further concern. From what I've heard, she is pregnant. Myself and a few friends and family members have driven through the camp area a few times on the lookout for her, but it's very large and there aren't exactly marked roads. Also, recently other people have been shot at while walking their dogs around there, or riding ATVs, so every time we go it's a risk. So that's it. I'm stuck hoping she's safe and under some kind of shelter. There are a lot of plywood houses and broken down RVs out there, and waiting to hear news when she has the baby. Yes, CPS and the local police are aware of my concerns. I'm worried the child will be born addicted to drugs because I don't know anyone who doesn't live out there who isn't a meth head. Thanks for your concern, all. I'm unsure what I'll do when the baby is born. I might have to take in the baby after all, just to make sure it doesn't live in that camp, and it may make me an asshole, but I am not looking forward to the hard work and drama that will come with it. New update. I posted another update in the comments a while back. It's on my account. Basically, my pregnant daughter shut me out of her life completely, and rumor had it she was living in a homeless camp with her weirdo lover out in the woods. It's a huge place, and my friends and I searched a few times but weren't able to find her. It's also dangerous because there aren't laws out there, and the homeless shoot at ATV riders and hikers and send dogs after people who come too close to what they consider their territory. To be clear, I don't think my daughter was part of that group. The camp is huge and full of meth addicts, sex traffickers, and drug labs. Anyway, the full story is in my account if you care. I did contact sperm donor's parents, and they have all but disowned him after very much the same disturbing behavior I outlined earlier, only geared toward their younger siblings. So that sucks. Back to the new news. All this shook out a couple weeks ago, but I hesitated to post because of my own emotions and the fact I know Reddit will be all over my ass for the deep anger, shame, and disappointment I have for my daughter. I came home from grocery shopping to find a strange pregnant woman at my door. That woman used to be my daughter, but had changed so much she was like a stranger. She chatters constantly so you can't get a word in. She has several small face tattoos and, forgive me for saying this, looks like she has aged 20 years. She'd been living rough. She was angry I locked her out. I changed the locks after she left, and basically expected to move back into her old room with no problem, like it was just another day from back in the winter when she lived here. Of course I wasn't going to turn her away, so I guess in a way she was right. She was living in the homeless camp with the sperm donor, and I insisted she take a shower because it looked like she hadn't since leaving. She also stank bad. She had no shame about blocking my number or what she put me through by disappearing. All she wanted to talk about was the grand fate that she and sperm donor are building. That they're building a community of new people, and she went on and on and on without mentioning the baby once. I don't know how anyone can stand them, but sperm donor has multiple partners and my daughter is one of them and is perfectly happy being his broodmare. The broodmare is my verbiage. Hers is much more royal. Frankly, based on what she overshared, sperm donor seems like a complete sex fiend. Finally, I broke in and asked and she said she had been to the doctor regularly. That was a lie. Found out later. And all is well with the baby. At this point I knew she had to be on drugs. If she was awake, she was talking, and none of what she said had an end or a point. Also, a lot was from Crazy Town. What I got from her was that, again, she and several other ladies, and men, somehow, were to carry the next generation of new people. Yes, the men. Yes, biological men. Sperm donor was sort of the middle of the wheel with the spokes, was how she described it. I've met him before, and I'm surprised he was able to get one girlfriend, much less whatever grouping is going on now. Anyway, sometimes she said she wanted to keep the baby, though she wouldn't tell me a plan to take care of and house it. I think she expected to stay with me, and sometimes she wanted to adopt it out, but not for the good of the baby but to spread the new people. This part is going to upset the internet, but the new people are apparently without gender expectations, and that was why she didn't know the baby's gender yet. Oh yeah, and also some of the wheel, her group, were empathic and they could communicate their feelings through the other world. As a house guest, she was the absolute worst. It was like she had gone feral out in the camp and cleaned up after herself to the point where she mostly did not even flush the toilet after using it. She ate everything, which was to be expected, but never cleaned up after herself and kept asking. Asking is too mild of a word, she demanded, for me to take her out to restaurants. I did it a couple of times because I missed her and was trying to make a connection, but then once afterward took her to the store to get baby supplies, and she was weirdly detached. Sort of picked up the first thing she saw on the shelf, and all the while it was yak 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 about her true family of new people and their grand fate. Anyway, I finally told her that she expected the baby in mid-July, which put her outside the time frame she originally gave me. I had it on my calendar. I was obsessed with the possible due date because I didn't know if she would find a baby on my doorstep or what. And yes, she was under the care of a doctor. Both lies. Getting her to focus on one subject was impossible. She would only stop talking long enough to take a breath and only listen long enough to you to stop for your own before she'd launch into a new thing, usually around sperm donor, who she loved but was nowhere in sight and was chilling back at the camp with the rest of his breeding stock, or whatever. Basically, I was waiting for her to come down off whatever high she was on, when she went into full-blown labor. It was a complete shit show. She was having pains but her water hadn't broken yet. At the hospital it came out that she had not been to the doctor once for the baby. There are programs in our state that cover pregnancies, so that put her at high risk, so she was admitted immediately. That's when the switch flipped and she became hateful towards nurses and doctors. She said the worst things and they were absolute saints in return. She also had delusions of grandeur and told them she was their queen and accused them of trying to punish her. It was so wild, I can't even describe the monster she became. So hateful. Racist, vicious, and the worst things you can say to people, she said them. She wasn't in hard labor yet, so it wasn't entirely the pain. I pulled one nurse aside and told her where she had been living and that I suspected drugs, though I hadn't caught her using yet. They were so professional and gave her painkillers that helped her mood. Not gonna lie, they doped her up because she was acting wild. Imagine my surprise when her blood work came out clean. I wasn't there for the birth because she didn't want me in the room with her, and heaven help me, I was a little relieved because I was ashamed of her behavior. But I did talk to a social worker on staff to let them know everything I did. The lady was very nice but couldn't speculate officially on my daughter's mental state. I said she had to be bipolar or manic or something because her behavior was not normal, but she asked if she had threatened to kill herself or harm the baby, and she hadn't. They can't step in until there's a threat. Miraculously, the child was born at a good weight and healthy, and not addicted. I don't want to give too much info on them because the internet is forever and one day they may search for their own past. My daughter lucked out big time and had a normal delivery as things went. She didn't give sperm donor's name out as the father, though I did to the social worker. They can't put the birth certificate on my word. She got up and left her baby that evening without officially checking out, without saying goodbye to me or her newborn. Because the hospital is a safe surrender point, she won't be charged for abandonment. CPS asked if I wanted to take the child, and though it tore me up, I said no. There are a lot of reasons for why. A big one is I don't want to be held hostage to my daughter's whims, and especially sperm donor. I don't want to be on the hook for more children who are likely to come. Also, look at my daughter. I did my best and she still turned out this way. Maybe I shouldn't try again. I know getting a new family is almost the best thing that could have happened for the baby, even with problems with the foster system. It has to be better than the camp. But I feel like dog shit about it even now. I also suspect they'll have a sibling soon as my daughter can arrange it. I know my daughter is not well. I know she's in a cult and probably in danger, and also probably an abuser herself, based on the stories she casually dropped about other members. She is also a selfish liar, and it is luck or the grace of God or what have you that her baby was born healthy. She is rolling the dice on her life and the life of her future children. She's sick and under a sex fiend's control and now thinks she has magic thought powers, but she has some responsibility in this too. All the rest of the transgender stuff with her lover, and if she is NB or not from the past doesn't matter. She's an adult and is making some bad choices. It's hard for me to type out, but the way she treated the hospital staff was so cruel. Seriously, I had to use a thesaurus to describe it because I can't even fully describe how bad it was. It showed me that whatever else, she thinks other people are below her. It's more than the mania. I'm just there to serve her, whenever she sees fit. She knew she would be giving birth soon, so she came home and expected me to take care of her. I did, of course, because she was 9 months pregnant. And the second she didn't have any more need for me, or the baby she had just given birth to, it was easy to take off again. I listened to her for days, and she expressed no feelings of hope for the baby other than a vehicle to spread their movement. No worry about their future life, and no more comments on me raising them as a sibling. She made the choice to leave and go back to sperm donor's harem or wheel or whatever. Sick or not, I'm ashamed to have raised someone with these kinds of values. Mentally ill people aren't bad people, but she has gone beyond merely bad choices. I haven't totally written her off and she may come back to sanity, but since all indications are that I'm blocked again, I'm going to think long and hard about boundaries and possibly moving. I'm worried about one day finding a bunch of curtly weirdos on my porch. So that's it, I don't know what to do. It's not like I have the resources to pay someone to deprogram my daughter, and that sounds very Hollywood. I need a realistic goal. It's more than just a cult. She needs a checkup from the neck up, and I don't have the legal standing to do anything. At least the baby is safe. That's the one bright spot. Thoughts are welcome, and, forgive me, any realistic suggestions, or just tell me if I'm way off base and I'm the asshole here. This has been a hell of a year in such a spiral. A year ago I had a somewhat of a slacker teenager under my roof. Now all of this. My girlfriend of a year slept with another guy while we were taking it slow, a month into dating me. I have been with this girl I'll call Jess for close to a year now. Since specifics matter here, we started dating around last Thanksgiving, but it was only about a month later when we said we were in an official relationship. I really liked this girl from the get-go, and we've gotten very close since then, and we're actually planning on moving together soon. Here's a problem. Recently Jess and I ran into a guy at a small get-together with mutual friends. They exchanged a weird look like there was something between them, but I didn't think too much of it at the time. During the party something came up about the place Jess went to for a date. The time was clear since it was a Christmas market in my town, and again I thought something was off about the guy. Well, later that night I actually got a text from him. He got my number from one of the mutual friends, but said, "Hey, I don't know you, but I thought you should know that Jess and I hooked up right after Christmas." I confronted Jess about this, and I could tell she tensed up right away. She got this sad look on her face, but confessed right away. She said she had met this guy on Tinder and hooked up a couple of times but stopped any contact before we became official. She said she wasn't sure we would get into a relationship at that time, but she still felt bad that I found out this way. She said she considered telling me but was afraid it would ruin things between us. I told her I needed some time to think and proceeded to get drunk that night and ignored her texts. The thing is, I feel very betrayed and I'm really considering ending things. Sure, we weren't official when this happened, but we had already been on multiple dates at that time, and I thought it was pretty clear that we were moving towards a full-fledged relationship. On my side, I had no interest in pursuing other girls at that point because I only wanted to be with Jess. And on her end she was definitely hinting at us evolving into a couple and strongly hinting at exclusivity. The other part that kills me is that during this early stage, Jess specifically said she wanted to take things slow physically until we knew each other better. But during this same time she hooks up with a guy she barely knew from Tinder. When I asked her this, she said it's different because she took it slow with me specifically because she thought we would get into a relationship, but it was somehow different with a casual hookup. That logic makes zero sense to me. I don't really want to talk about it with my friends because I think they would hate Jess if they end up staying together. But I would like to hear opinions here. Would you stay in a relationship like this if things were going well but the beginning was so shady? TL.er. My GF met up and hooked up with a guy while we were dating but not officially while she was taking it slow with me. Relevant comments. Comment 1. In my opinion, if you're dating someone and moving towards a serious relationship, you don't freaking bang other people. This would be a deal breaker for me, but you do you, man. If you can't get past it, then end it. OP, yeah, that's how I feel as well. It would have been one thing if she was just talking to other guys in the early stages while we were still defining things. Of course, that's fine and normal, but it feels like a slap in the face that she found another guy to sleep with after we had already gone on quite a few dates and I made it clear I thought we were moving towards a serious relationship, which she seemed to also acknowledge. There is no way she didn't know I would feel hurt that she did that. OP also added to a deleted comment. Teacher logic made no sense to me. She tried to explain that with guys she wants to be in a relationship, she wants it to feel special and wants to build an emotional connection. But for guys she sees no future. She sometimes just wanted some physical fun that meant nothing. But I just can't wrap my mind about that. It feels like a gut punch that as we were getting closer and building a connection, she didn't want to be intimate with me, but instead preferred to find someone else. No matter how she rationalizes it, it's hard not to feel like a second choice of sorts. Update. As the title says, I decided to break up with Jess. I kept going back and forth because I was worried I was throwing away a great thing over something that happened in the past, but the problem is I thought I really wouldn't be able to get past it. I can't help what she did was really shitty. Yes, I know that technically she did not cheat, but she knew that I wanted a real relationship and that we were potentially moving in that direction. But meanwhile she expected me to plan, and pay for, interesting dates, court her and prove that I was worthy of her while she happily hooked up with randos who basically did nothing but show an interest in fucking. Fuck that. In a follow-up conversation it also came up that her friends sort of guided her to act like this. That she should basically allow herself to have fun and to keep her casual options open but with me to make me work for it, and show that I wasn't just looking for sex but was capable of being a committed partner. The whole thing just seems so manipulative and ugly. And these were also mutual friends who I considered to be nice girls, and now my friends as well. Now I never want to see any of those pieces of shit ever again. Anyway, I know this is starting to sound a bit like a rant, lol, but I felt pretty pissed off and basically called it quits. The actual breakup was actually quite unpleasant. No harsh words were exchanged, but Jess cried and we kind of talked about some happy times. I guess that's the hardest part about this. Like, I don't think she's a bad girl and maybe we could have had a nice future together like we did over the past few months. But in the end, I do think I made the right decision. I want to be with someone who treats me well from the get-go, not someone who manipulates me while playing games just so she can have her cake and eat it too. I was excited to meet my sister's wife, but she was cold and unfriendly. She avoids talking to me but was happy and chatty with others. December 17, 2017. Using a throwaway account for privacy. Sorry if this gets long. My sister, a lesbian, married her wife a year ago. They get financial support from our wealthy and generous parents, have good jobs, and have decided to have a baby. Her wife is visiting for the holidays and is about 6 months pregnant. Since I'm in college, I don't get to see them very often, but my parents help me out financially, so it's fair. I'm eagerly looking forward to meeting their new baby. My sister and her wife have been together since their senior year of college and were friends since childhood. I'm 7 years younger, so I was kind of out of the loop. I didn't really get to know my sister's wife until they got married, and even then, I was busy with my first year of college. I was really looking forward to this trip to spend some one-on-one time with her. Our parents live about 2 hours from my sister and her wife, and I flew in from across the country. We're all staying with our parents, who are not yet retired. My flight got in late last night, so I slept in. My parents went to work, my sister went shopping, and my sister-in-law stayed in, but I didn't realize she was around until she came downstairs while I was making lunch. She's obviously pregnant, and I haven't seen her since the wedding, so I was really excited to see her. She wasn't. I said hi and went to hug her, but she backed away. I apologized, and she just looked at me weirdly and went through the fridge. I tried to make small talk, asking when she was due. She gave me a weird look like I'd asked something inappropriate, then just said March and kept making her food. I said I was excited to have a niece or nephew and asked if she wanted a boy or girl. She sighed loudly, said she didn't care, and moved on. My sister had mentioned her wife had PTSD from a previous pregnancy, so I thought that might be it. I tried changing the subject and asked about her work. She set her knife down loudly, stared at me for 30 seconds, then said fine, and went to the dining room. Throughout the day, I kept trying to interact with her. I offered to get her a drink. She muttered no. I asked what she was watching. She said, "You wouldn't know it. It was The Simpsons." I said I was glad she was spending the holidays with us. She begrudgingly said, "Yeah." I thought maybe this was just her personality. Then my parents and sister came home, and she was super cheerful and nice to them. My dad asked if they had names picked out, and she wouldn't stop talking. My sister wanted a family name, and her wife wanted a unique name. My mom suggested my name, Anais, since it's uncommon but a family name, same as my grandmother. I said I wouldn't mind having a niece with my name, and my sister was enthusiastic. Her wife gave me a death glare. At dinner, I asked if she could pass the potatoes, and she ignored me. I repeated myself, and my sister had to tell her. She then giggled and said, "Guess I didn't hear." What should I do? Should I tell my sister or confront her wife directly? I have good relationships with my parents and sister and want to be involved with my niece and nephew, so I don't want to go no contact. How can I resolve this? Too long, didn't read. My sister's pregnant wife is cold and short with me. What should I do? Update, as of this morning. This morning at breakfast, my sister-in-law actually spoke to me, but it wasn't positive. She asked if I was seeing anyone, in a snarky tone. I said no, I'm busy with school. She responded, "Well, not everyone finds someone." My sister changed the subject, asking my parents about their winter home. My sister-in-law was so nice to them, saying how gorgeous the house is and how grateful she was for the vacation she and my sister took there last month. My mom started gushing about her, and it was a mush fest. After breakfast, I took our dogs for a walk. When I came back, my parents and sister had gone shopping, and my sister-in-law was home alone. She asked how I liked college. I said I liked it and started talking about my pre-dental major. She rolled her eyes. I apologized for oversharing and she said, "No, it's fine, you just have a problem with reading the room, I guess." Then she walked away. When my sister comes home, I'm definitely going to tell her about this. OP clarified why her sister-in-law might not like her. There was one incident regarding her wedding that comes to mind. Initially, the wedding was scheduled on the day of my finals, before invitations were produced or mailed. I called my sister to tell her that I either couldn't make it or the date would have to be changed. She was really upset because she and her wife had wanted a winter wedding, and the date seemed perfect for them. I suggested they didn't have to sacrifice the winter aspect, just maybe move it a day back. We had a big fight, and I assume my sister-in-law was involved, but my sister, who likes to be liked, didn't want to stay mad at me, so we worked through it. The wedding ended up being the day after my finals, which I was grateful for, and there's been no resentment or hard feelings since. My sister actually laughs at herself now for being kind of unreasonable. Her quote from that time was, "You just don't have to go, it's just a test." I was my sister's maid of honor, and I didn't see much of my sister-in-law prior to the wedding. She'd gotten food poisoning from her bachelorette party, so she was kind of holed up for the majority of the pre-wedding hubbub. During the reception, I made a toast, talked about my sister and her wife's friendship, how we've just been waiting for the two of them to get married, they're a match made in heaven, etc., etc. She teared up, gave me a big hug and said she was excited to be my sister-in-law. I wanted to talk more with her, but some relatives wanted to ask me why I chose the college I did, so I went to go talk to them. I'm probably going to bring this up with my sister either today or tomorrow. I'll probably bring this up with my sister either today or tomorrow, depending on what my sister-in-law is up to. Highlight comments. Commenter. So you said that the longest time you spent with her was camping, from a previous comment, and the wedding. Could you elaborate on the wedding? Did you interact with her at all? Were you at your sister's bridal party? But I agree with other commenters, you've just got to talk to your sister and/or parents to see what can change to make this better for the rest of your stay. OP, there was one thing I might be able to think of in terms of her wedding. It was initially scheduled on the day of my finals. This was prior to invitations being produced and mailed, just their idea. So I called my sister to tell her I either wouldn't make it or the date would have to be changed. She was really upset about it, because she and her wife had wanted a winter wedding. The date seemed perfect for them, etc. I said they didn't have to sacrifice the winter aspect, just maybe move it a day back. There was a kind of big fight, and I can assume my sister-in-law got in on it, but my sister is the kind of person who likes to be liked, think of her as a human golden retriever. And she didn't want to be mad at me, so we worked through it. Her wedding ended up being the day after my finals, which I was grateful for, and there's been no resentment or hard feelings since. My sister actually laughs at herself for being kind of an ass. Her choice quote from that time was, "You just don't have to go, it's just a test." I was my sister's maid of honor, and I didn't see much of my sister-in-law prior to the wedding. She'd gotten food poisoning from her bachelorette party, so she was kind of holed up for the majority of the pre-wedding hubbub. During the reception, I made a toast, talked about my sister and her wife's friendship, how we've just been waiting for the two of them to get married, they're a match made in heaven, etc. etc. She teared up, gave me a big hug and said she was excited to be my sister-in-law. I wanted to talk more with her, but some relatives wanted to ask me why I chose the college I did, so I went to go talk to them. I'm probably going to bring this up with my sister either today or tomorrow. It all depends on what my sister-in-law is up to. Commenter. Even if this is the underlying issue, and sister-in-law was annoyed by OP's attempts to make conversation, sister-in-law is still being an asshole. She's 26, old enough to have the self-control to say, "Sorry, OP, I want some time alone right now. I'm not really up for talking." She's allowed to feel irritated, but being pregnant doesn't give her the excuse to be rude without apologizing. My direct advice, OP, is to scale back your interactions with your sister-in-law. You can still be polite. It will highlight the drastic difference between the way you treat her and the way she treats you. Every time you make an effort to be friendly, she mocks you and belittles you. You deserve better, but it's also not your responsibility to earn decent behavior from her. Focus on those who return your friendliness, like your sister and parents. Next time you're home alone with your sister-in-law, try doing solo activities like reading or playing video games to pass the time. Update, recovered through Reddit. December 20th, 2017. So I didn't get the chance to talk to my sister. When my parents came back from shopping with my sister, my mom started saying how she had the perfect onesie for her granddaughter. Before my sister-in-law could start gushing, I asked what my mom meant. She asked if I hadn't heard I'd be having a niece, and I replied I hadn't. My sister said it was weird, because she'd asked her wife to tell me once they'd gotten the ultrasound. Her wife had zero excuse, and had the most deer-in-the-headlights reaction. There was something that just sort of snapped, and I started crying. I felt kind of spoiled and horrible for it, so I apologized, and went upstairs with the dogs. My parents came upstairs, and my mom went to ask if I was okay, and my sister and her wife started shouting downstairs. My mom basically said that my sister-in-law does not like me and that it wasn't really my fault, she's just bad with people she doesn't know, and took it out on me inappropriately. And yes, my sister-in-law was still pissed about the wedding date thing, which just made it worse. I felt really shitty and just like really bad. Part of it wasn't my fault, but part of it was my fault. And apparently my sister knew about both issues beforehand, and had given my sister-in-law directions to try and get along with me. They were still shouting downstairs, and I was kind of bordering on a meltdown, so I asked my mom if we could take the dogs for another walk. We went out the back, and when we came home my sister had left the house to cool down, and her wife was upstairs. I spent most of the rest of the day downstairs, until my sister came home. She had obviously been crying and was in a bad mood. My mom took her into the kitchen to try and calm her down, so I kept sitting in the living room. I felt like a bratty little kid again. Like, I genuinely felt like I'd fucked up my sister's marriage and probably ruined our relationship in the process too. Everything just felt awful. And when my sister came out of the kitchen, she didn't even look at me. Just went storming back upstairs. Her wife started yelling first, and they were fighting for a while before it got quieter upstairs. My mom, dad and I went out for dinner, and when we came home my sister-in-law was waiting for us. My sister-in-law apologized to me, saying she had been petty and rude, and that the wedding date thing had been a non-issue. I said it was okay if she was upset about the wedding thing, but I wish she had let me know. She said it wasn't that easy, since my sister would basically take a bullet for me, and it had caused them a big fight before their wedding. I said I had no idea and that I was sorry to be the source of that tension, and I just wanted to be able to be a good sister-in-law myself and be a good aunt. My sister-in-law got angry and said I had ruined the opportunity for the first one, and she wasn't banking on the second one. Then she stormed upstairs, and she and my sister got into another big fight. I felt awful. The bad feelings manifested physically, and I spent most of the night throwing up while my sister and her wife fought. My mom was really kind to stay up with me, and my dad tried to get my sister and her wife to get off each other's backs. I specifically heard my sister-in-law shouting, "Who would you jump in front of a train for, me or her?" And my sister responded without missing a beat, "My sister, no questions asked." They got quieter after that, and my sister-in-law started screaming about an hour later saying, "I'd let all my siblings die for you." My sister slept on the couch, and the two of us went out for breakfast in the morning. She'd basically said that after my sister-in-law gave birth, she and my sister were going to separate. They would try counseling prior to the birth, and afterwards too, but if things weren't getting better, they'd be divorcing. I said that it shouldn't have gotten that far, and I was sorry for pushing both of them. My sister said that my sister-in-law does this to all my sister's friends, and they've been fighting often. But she clarified that the way she treated me was a deal breaker. She said it might have sounded sad, but I was her best friend from birth, and she wouldn't let me not feel welcome like that. I felt really guilty and started crying again. She kept saying she wanted it this way, their relationship was broken as is, etc. It's been tense and awkward ever since. My sister-in-law won't look at me or speak to me, and I've given up. My sister has been by my side a lot, and has amped up the good sister behavior 10x. I feel like shit, everything is really terrible. And I'm sure I'm going to be making another post during the actual Christmas bullshit. Not a great update, but there we are. Too long, didn't read. My sister and her wife are separating because of my sister-in-law's behavior towards me. Spot on comments. Commenter. The sister says her wife treats all her friends that way. Isn't that classic jealous abuser behavior, trying to isolate them from friends? I guess the parents get a pass because they're rich and are giving money. Replier. Yeah, that is exactly what I think it is. As the other comment said, she isolated her sister from her friends and tried to isolate her from her sister. She was only being nice to the parents because they are wealthy and she wants to keep her hand in the money pot. Other commenter. Hey, sister says her wife treats all her friends that way. Isn't that classic jealous abuser behavior, trying to isolate them from friends? Yes, it absolutely is, as seen time and time again in the posts on this subreddit. Sorry to hijack your comment, but I just want to give a small public service announcement to anyone reading this. If your partner is acting even 1/4 the way that this sister-in-law is acting, then you either need to get out or find some way to shut that shit down as soon as possible. This behavior does not magically go away with time and will only grow as you sit and stay quiet hoping it'll blow over. Remember, for your sake, if your partner is trying to drive a wedge between you and your family or friends, they are planning on making sure you depend solely on them either emotionally and/or financially, so you can't get away from them when you realize and it's become too late. Please make sure to keep some kind of relationship with someone reliable and dependable in your life besides your partner, so you always have an escape in a worst-case scenario. Don't get trapped. Am I the A for getting upset with my wife for secretly having an abortion after I clearly stated I didn't want children? I have been happily married to my wife, Clara, for around 3 years now. I love this woman to pieces. I don't want to get sentimental, but she truly is my other half, and I cannot see myself with another woman, even now. Before we got married, I made my stance on children clear. I didn't want any. She agreed at the moment, and I thought that was that. About 1.5 years into our marriage, she brings up the question of children again. She asks me if I want kids. I say no, I don't. She hums and we go back to doing what we did before. It wasn't a conversation so much as it was an odd question this time around, but I didn't think anything of it. We had a very robust sex life, but always took the necessary precautions. She has the implant and I use a condom around 90% of the time, so I wasn't worried. Her bookshelf recently broke, so I ordered a new one. I had wanted to build it as a surprise and put her books up on it for when she came home. While going through them, I noticed an old journal of hers. I immediately smiled and flipped through it. When we were in college, she'd carry it around. It was a future planning notebook or sorts. If she wanted something in life, she'd draw out exactly what she envisioned, add clip-ins, the whole 9 yards. Manifestation, if you will. She had shown me it in college after declaring that she wanted to pursue her doctorate, and I remember being stunned at the attention to detail. I mean, we were only sophomores and she knew exactly what she wanted to do, what she wanted to study, and where she would take herself. It made me feel out of depth. I liked it. Anyway, I flipped through the journal, reminiscing about the past. I hadn't expected there to be any new entries, at least not anything recent that I hadn't experienced with her. But as I opened it up, I saw something I never thought I'd see. It was a section dedicated to pregnancy and baby prep. She had researched prenatal vitamins, OB/GYNs in our area, had images of cradles, etc. It was only 2 pages, but I remember feeling so sick. In my head, there was only one reason she'd put that in a journal like this. She wanted kids. Naturally, I was torn up. I kept telling myself I'd been upfront about what I wanted, and if she hadn't, that was her fault. But the thought that she'd secretly been suffering because of me, that she was holding herself back from the life she wanted to please me, I couldn't stand it. I confronted her about it as soon as we came home, and I found out the situation was a lot worse than I thought. Clara did indeed want kids, but claimed she wanted our relationship more and was okay with compromise. I asked her 1,000,000 times if she was sure. I really wanted her to be honest and not feel like she had to hold anything back. She insisted that not having children wasn't a deal breaker for her, but I kept pushing. I couldn't understand why she'd put something that wasn't that important to her in that journal. In the midst of our conversation, she dropped the bomb. She told me she had an abortion a year and a half ago. Offered up the information like I should have been relieved. Like it was the proof she needed to convince me that she meant what she had said about children not being a deal breaker. I can't describe what I felt at that moment. What I'm still feeling. What I can say is that I have never blown up at my wife the way I did that night. I didn't put my hands on her. I would never put my hands on her, but it was not a pretty exchange. I just remember feeling hurt that she hadn't consulted me on such an important decision. That she went and had such a life-altering procedure without discussing it with me. That I didn't even fucking notice that it happened. I mean, those things have side effects, right? She would have been bedridden for days afterwards, in physical and emotional pain. How could I not have seen the signs? I'm still beating myself up about it. I remember her asking me if I wanted kids, but nothing about her emotional state for the rest of that week when she would have had the procedure done. How much can I really claim to care about her? I don't want children, I still don't. But I'd rather chew my left arm off than make her have an abortion, even more so now after she's told me she isn't really against having kids the way I am. I'd happily raise a kid if it meant she didn't need to go through something so drastic. I've been staying with my sister for the last week and a half. I needed space to think, so I left. I want to see her, to ask if she's okay, but I don't know what to do or say. I'm still unbelievably angry at her and at myself. I don't want to yell at her again. I think the first time around scared her pretty badly, and I don't want to repeat that. My sister thinks I'm being petty, punishing my wife for something I would have agreed with regardless. But I wouldn't have fucking agreed. I don't know. Relevant comments. OP on not considering of prioritizing his wife's preferences when she is prioritizing his decisions. Comment 1. OP. To clarify, I never once said this. If that's how my post came across, let me clear it up. If she came to me as asked to start trying for a kid, in other words, to go off birth control and stop using condoms, my answer would be no. I've always been firm in that. She's never pushed the issue, but no amount of begging would entice me to plan to have a child. Having an unplanned child, on the other hand, wasn't something we discussed. Obviously, hindsight is 20/20, but that doesn't help much here. Update. I woke up to lots amount of comments and outright hate, so I thought I'd clear a few things up. A lot of you were concerned about me snoping in Clara's journal. I met this woman when I was 6 years old. We had experienced over half of what she had written down in that notebook together. She's been letting me read her entries routinely since college, though I would read them more often back then. Like I said, I found her decisiveness incredibly attractive. But college was 7 years ago and times have changed. I'm not sure if she has other journals, but her use of this specific one died down as we got older, and so did my readership. I felt no qualms about picking it up and reading it that day because I quite frankly never have. This was not the first time I read that journal without her present, as I've been given express permission to do so. It was meant to be a quick trip down memory lane. I had no idea she had added more things, let alone pregnancy planning. She keeps all her old journals, sketchbooks, etc. in the same area, and this book was in that pile. You should have gotten a vasectomy. I'm not discussing my reasons for not wanting kids here, but I did discuss them thoroughly with Clara before we got married. Our reasons for not wanting children were very similar based on that initial conversation, but I guess hers wavered as time went on. How that turned me into an evil dictator that refused to hear her opinions out, I'll never understand. But I guess that's Reddit for you? I didn't get a vasectomy because I'm not sure that I won't want kids 10-15 years down the line. I am positive I don't want them at the current moment, but I'm 27. Opinions and circumstances change. Regardless of its reversibility, it's marketed as a permanent surgery. Vasectomies are covered by my health insurance, but reversals are not. It simply made no sense to invest in something I wasn't sure could be undone if I didn't want it anymore, not when Clara and I were taking the necessary precautions to avoid pregnancy otherwise. She got on birth control way before we started having sex. I had absolutely nothing to do with that decision. As far as I know, she's quite happy with it. The chances of pregnancy with the implant are less than 1%, even less when using condoms as well. We talked about the decision together and ultimately decided a vasectomy wasn't the right choice. Someone actually went as far as to say that because I didn't get my vas deferens cinched, an unexpected pregnancy was inevitable. A 0.5% chance and inevitable are two vastly different things. You guys do realize that vasectomies aren't 100% effective either, right? Unless you're pushing for abstinence, I really don't want to hear it. We also don't go raw unless we both agree to it, which I would never pressure her to do. You verbally abused her. Clara and I both grew up in shitty homes. Our parents yelled and were extremely combative. After growing up in that environment, we agreed to avoid that kind of behavior in our relationship, and we do our best to keep to that. I have never raised my voice at her before this argument. I'm more on the timid side, so I imagine it was a shock for her to see me so angry. She also just doesn't do well with yelling in general. It wasn't my words, so much as it was my tone. Should I have raised my voice? No, but I'm not an infallible robot. My comment about not putting my hands on her was to draw conclusions away from physical violence. Clearly it wasn't taken that way and had the opposite effect. The exchange was heated on both sides. Lots of things were said. It was the worst disagreement we have ever had, and we have been together for close to a decade, close friends for even longer. That being said, I still think it was on the tamer side of the overall spectrum, relative to other people. That spectrum might be a bit skewed due to my childhood, but take that as you will. You're a dick for leaving her for a week and a half. To be fully clear, this was a mutually respected decision. I told her I needed space to think. She suggested I take it outside the house. Granted, she wasn't the happiest when she said it, but we had just finished a heated argument. We texted the entire time I was at my sister's place. Very dull and mundane conversation, mostly pleasantries, but I didn't just abandon her. We weren't speaking audibly, but we weren't in contact. I don't know how else to phrase that. Things were just tense and very different from our usual level of interaction. Everything was surface level. We would check to make sure the other ate, showered, whatever else, but that was it. There was no continuation of our discussion while we were apart. We were both taking the time to make sure we were in the right headspace to have a proper conversation, as is common for our relationship. It just took me a bit longer to get there. She wouldn't have been bedridden. Abortions aren't that deep. I'll concede to the physical aspect of this. I've often heard them described as a bad period, and a lot of the women in my life tend to tap out during their monthlies, which is what I based my assumption on. I accept that it was incorrect. Though I'm not sure if I should, because half of you agreed with my take in the post, condemning me for not noticing, and the other half told me I was overreacting. Again, I guess that's Reddit for you. More importantly, I will not agree on the general take on the emotional aspect. At the time, I still did not believe Clara genuinely wanted to have an abortion after hearing her updated stance on having kids. I imagined her feelings would be on par with someone who experienced a miscarriage rather than an abortion because of this. I still do. The only thing that would change my mind at this point is Clara herself. You should go to couples counseling and seek therapy individually. We are both in different types of talk therapy and have been for several years. I'm not sure how helpful couples therapy would be on top of that, but I'm not opposed to it. Asking if you wanted kids was enough. She doesn't owe you anything. Reading through the comments, many of you thought this, and we're simply going to have to disagree. As the father of the child, the decision to abort should not have been made without my clear and explicit knowledge that she was pregnant. We weren't separated at the time, nor did I cheat, and contrary to popular belief, I'm not abusive. I deserve to know. I won't apologize for expecting my wife to consult me on family planning decisions. I'd do the same for her 10 times over if roles were reversed. Call it controlling. I really don't care. Asking if I want kids is a completely different discussion than terminating a pregnancy. I am on my way home now and will update if the situation changes, likely sometime this week. I'd ask for well wishes, but I think it's clear none of you are rooting in my favor. Fucking hell. Edit. Took out the numbers to prevent text from looking long and blocky. Final update. Before I got into where Clara and I are now, a lot of you had some misconceptions concerning things like me reading Clara's journal, vasectomies, and other things. I made a separate post addressing those. Read it, don't, whatever. I came home the morning following my initial post, and Clara and I had a very long conversation. We both apologized for letting the previous conversation get out of hand and acting out of character. I also explained why I left in the first place and apologized for raising my voice. She's especially sensitive to that kind of thing, so I addressed it first. She forgave me and said as long as we could keep things calm this time around, it would be okay. She was more interested in finding out what I was so deep in thought about that I was gone for so long. Again, we do take breaks from conflicts from time to time and revisit them when we're calmer, though this was the first one where I physically removed myself from her proximity. I told her how I initially felt after reading her journal entry. I hadn't been mad then. Part of me was confused. We had agreed on no kids before getting married after all. The other half was riddled with anxiety. Contrary to what you may all think, I adore Clara. She is quite honestly one of only good things this life has given me. I didn't want to lose her, but if she wanted kids badly enough to put them in her journal, I wasn't sure what that would mean for us. She downplayed the importance of the entry. In her view, not everything she puts into the journal is something she's genuinely hoping for. Some things are just nice to fantasize about, and not every fantasy is meant to be reality. I was honest. I told her that her words were hard to believe given how meticulously she had written everything down and planned it out. The last thing I wanted was for her to harbor resentment over what her life could have been. She assured me that wasn't the case, but I'm still unsure. Talking about the abortion itself was hard on both of us. I wanted to know if she was in pain, what signs I had missed. I didn't really press for details on the procedure, but we talked a lot about how she felt afterwards, why she hid it, and how she came to her decision. I just held her in my arms and listened for the most part. It was gut-wrenching to say the least. It turns out that the second time she had asked if I wanted kids occurred a month or two after she had already had the procedure done. She had asked because she was contemplating whether or not to tell me about it. I guess she had ultimately decided not to. She told me I was actually with her the day she took the pills. I remembered the day because she had been crying and I wasn't sure why. When I asked, she cited cramps, so I got her a heating pad and laid down with her. Her periods have always been pretty hard on her, so I guess I didn't think much of it. In hindsight, I should have realized something was up because she hasn't had bad cramps in years. Still, I'm glad she didn't go through it completely alone. Much later that day, I asked her why she didn't come to me when she realized she was pregnant. In her eyes, she was protecting our relationship. She knows our circumstances, my reasons for not wanting kids, my stance on abortion. She didn't want to burden me with having to choose between the two, and so she made the choice herself. As hard as I try, I can't understand or accept her reasoning. Her decision to go through this alone, while meant to shield me, inadvertently communicated that she doesn't trust me to support her or handle the truth. All I understood is that she feels like she can't lean on me when she's in trouble. And if that's the case, I'm not sure why we're married. She's always been independent, but this is the first time I've felt completely blindsided by not being included. I asked up and down if I'd given her a reason to doubt me, to doubt my commitment to her, if she felt I wasn't a reliable partner, etc. She said no, but that just makes all this harder to grasp. She said she was afraid saying anything would change how I viewed her, our relationship, but I'm having a hard time distinguishing insecurity, anxiety from reasonable doubt. I asked her if she knew I loved her, how much I care for her, the lengths I would go to make her happy, etc. She laughed a little and reminded me of a line from my wedding vows. We shared private vows before our ceremony, and I had said quite a bit. I was a little shocked that she remembered that portion at all, let alone word for word. We transitioned to talking about the promises we made to one another, and just times in our relationship where we had complete trust, faith in one another. It helped put us both in better moods and ended the night on a lighter note for both of us. We're doing okay at the moment. Not quite where we were before, but getting there. Everything's still incredibly raw, including our eyes. We both broke down 5 minutes into the conversation. Clara is against couples counseling right now. I'm ambivalent, as we're still working a couple of things out on our own. I'm not sure how helpful a third party asking what steps we're willing to take to improve trust and transparency will really be, but I'm open to anything at this point. We're not leaving one another. Issues or not, we both think it's clear that there's still an abundance of love between us, and we don't want to throw that away. Some of you will be happy to know that Clara and I decided on a new rule for ourselves. Clara was a lot more upset about my leaving than she initially let on. From now on, the distance between the top and bottom floors of our home is all the space either of us are allowed to take. We need to cool our heads. If proximity really does become an issue, the max either of us are allowed to stay outside the house is 48 hours. So no more week-long stays at my sister's. I discovered my SO of 3 years was texting back and forth with another person every day and was sending nude photos to each other. A little bit of backstory. SO and I have been together for 4 years, and about 2 years ago when the Rona hit, I moved in with him as we both lost our respective jobs and needed to save a bit from gas and utilities. Since then I have found a new office job and so takes some odd jobs online, but he basically stays at home most of the time. So has always been on the controlling side. He wanted me to cut all my male friends from my life. Hindsight is 20/20, I know, but in his defense, he also cut all contacts with women, or at least to my knowledge. So has always been very adamant that he doesn't condone cheating, and even if someone else in his life was a cheater, he would cut them out of his life. The relationship has had its ups and downs. We have had a fair share of arguments, and a few months ago we hit a rough patch, but recently things were looking okay for a while. Or so I thought. So has become quite guarded with his phone lately, including hiding it if I look over his shoulder. He has never done this before, and it's very not like him. I am very open with my personal tech items, He's always welcome to look through my phone and laptop because I have nothing to hide. We even know each other's phone passwords. My gut feeling kept telling me that something was wrong, so when I got up for work this morning while he was still sleeping, I admit, I shouldn't have done what I did. I took his phone from the nightstand and checked out his conversations. So has been chatting with a girl he met online, 25. I only skimmed through the last few messages as I didn't want him to wake up and catch me snooping, but they have been texting back and forth every day while I was at work and sending each other nudes. I was so shaken and disgusted. I don't know when it all started, but I assume it's been at least a month because that's when I first noticed the suspicious phone guarding behavior. Honestly, no matter how much I look for a solution, there's no coming back from this. I know I have to leave. I haven't confronted him yet because I don't want him to try and persuade me to stay or spin it that it's my fault. I also don't believe in closure, so there's really no use in telling him that I know. Here's where I need advice. I have a place to move to and I have to move all my stuff. I don't want to have him damage my stuff to spite me or something. He has a history of throwing my possessions when angry, so I'll have people come help me move when he's not in the house. We have separate finances, so that's not an issue. The problem is, we have a dog. I adopted him with his approval when I moved in with him. I'm saying it's technically my dog since I do 90% of the dog activities. He rarely takes him out and I buy all the dog toys and dog food. Basically, he's the fun parent that gets only the pets and hugs. I know he loves the dog and the dog loves him, but I don't think he'd be able to take care of him and get up at 6 a.m. to walk him. My baby is also too used to the house and us, and he'll probably be stressed out if I move him. Should I take the dog with me without telling my soon-to-be ex, or should I leave the dog with him? Another thing I need advice for is, should I leave him a note or a message with any explanation? Update 1. First, I'd like to thank everyone who commented on my previous post. It really helped put things in perspective for me. A few people asked for an update. It will be a lengthy one, so brace yourselves. One particular comment stuck out to me, that my pet doesn't know what's best for them and they could roll in literal shit and be happy, which really solidified my decision. As a preface, I'd like to apologize. I was paranoid that I could be found out, so I altered a couple of details in the original, one of which was that we owned a cat, not a dog. However, I was still doing 90% of the caring for the cat. On to the update. After reading all the comments and making the decision to take the cat, I called my best friend, her boyfriend, and my parents to tell them I'm breaking up and discuss logistics. I also told them to not mention anything in writing on the off chances that SO sees the messages. It took me quite some time to put everything in motion, 3 weeks to be precise, in which time I was doing my best to act like everything was okay while secretly moving some of my stuff to my parents' place to ease the final load. Finally, last Friday morning, my best friend, her boyfriend, and my dad came. We loaded up everything on my father's truck and left. The whole ordeal took 1.5 HRS. I was honestly amazed how much stuff I managed to accumulate for just 2 years. I took everything that I paid for out of my pocket, including a monitor and a headset that I lent him due to his equipment breaking and he never bought new ones. The only thing I left was a queen-size bed I bought shortly after moving in. I also made sure to log into X's World of Warcraft account to cancel his subscription, which was paid from my bank account. I left a note on his desk that basically said, "Do not panic, you have not been robbed." I just took all my stuff and left. I'm taking the cat with me because I don't trust you to take care of her properly. Do not call me, my friends, or my family. We have already had the talk, so there's nothing else to say. Have a nice life, your ex. I didn't tell him I knew about the cheating because at this point it was irrelevant. In retrospect, it was just the last straw on top of many other problems. But hindsight is always 20/20th. I blocked his number and never looked back. Sure enough, he messaged me on WhatsApp as soon as he came back to the empty flat. The gist of the messages was that we could have done it the Civil War. LMAO. And why did I take the cat this way? We raised her together and he loved her. He also tried to call 3 times but gave up soon after. I then blocked him on WhatsApp as well. The next few days were pretty uneventful. Yesterday, he showed up at my workplace unannounced. I was pretty annoyed but didn't want to make a scene in front of the colleges, so I took a break and went out with him to the park across the street. Knowing him, he wouldn't just fuck off and leave me alone. He said he wanted closure and that I owed it to him after all these years. The conversation was mostly boring, so I'll highlight the important details. He said he wanted my monitor back and that he's willing to pay for it or trade me his new one, which is better, but wasn't with the same curvature that he was used to. I told him that I like my monitor and tough luck. The best part is he went out, bought a new monitor, set it up to play WoW, but realized that I also took the headset. He then asked his mother to buy him one and she bought headphones without a mic. Pity. He asked to have the cat back. He offered me money, offered me all his crypto savings, and even offered me 60k gold and wow, LMAO. I told him some things can't be bought with money. He then asked to co-parent, and when I said no to that too, he asked to at least say goodbye to her in person, also denied. I brought up that I'm the cat's primary caregiver and he can't even clean her shit. He replied he could, when push comes to shove, but didn't since I was doing those things anyway, despite him being in the flat almost 24/7. I also pointed out that if he really loved the cat that much, he'd want the best for her and to be with the one who takes care of her, instead of wanting to keep her for selfish reasons. He kind of agreed on that. The most baffling part, he offered to pay me to go grocery shopping together. We used to do that all the time when we were together. I pointed him to a couple of sites where he can buy groceries and have them delivered. He said it was too much work. I told him to adjust and evolve. He also apologized one too many times for hurting me, to which I replied every time I wasn't hurt, I was just disgusted and cringed at the conversations I read, to which he got offended and mumbled that it was private, you know. Not once did he mention the side chick, even then he didn't have the balls to admit to the affair. In their messages there was a recurring joke that if he comes to the hotel where she works, they'd have to fuck in the janitor's room. I brought her up a couple of times, told him I wish them both the very best, and since I left him the bed, he doesn't have to worry about fucking in the janitor's room anymore. He asked to be friends multiple times. I told him, also multiple times, he betrayed me and he's a pathological liar and I don't want to be friends with a dishonest person. He legit couldn't comprehend how his dishonesty impacts a potential friendship. He said he wanted to tell me he wasn't committed to me anymore but couldn't bring himself to do that. I pointed out the hypocrisy of him blowing up at me for platonically talking to male friends online, but he cheats the moment a semi-attractive woman comes his way. He said that a woman cheating on a man is the greatest sin, but a man cheating on a woman is not so severe. What the actual fuck? The rest of the conversation was him trying to play buddy-buddy and talk to me about his life and me reminding him that I'm not interested in his life and that he's a closed chapter to me. After what seemed to be eternity, we said our, hopefully, final goodbyes and I went back to work. In conclusion, for the past week since I left, I've felt like a huge load have dropped off my shoulders. I have all the time in the world, I'm working on myself, I'm reconnecting with people I haven't talked to in years. I'm trying to live my best life and I don't regret anything. There were good times, there were bad times. It was a valuable experience and a lesson learned what to look for in a partner and, more importantly, what not to overlook. Huge thanks to everyone that commented on my post. You really gave me the push I needed to make what I hope is the right decision. Update 2. I was contemplating whether to write this last update or not. A bunch of things have happened since I last posted and eventually, I figured we are all more or less people who laugh at their own farts and enjoy the occasional justice boner, so I decided y'all might appreciate how karma has caught up with X. Disclaimer and some background. I left out a lot of information in the original post and altered a lot of details to make sure X does not find the post and connect the dots. Our real ages are 28, him, 33, me, and 34, side chick. X and I were together for almost 7 years. Note 4. X had a chronic disease, nothing fatal if treated, very manageable, and a lot of people with the condition can work. He was of course using it as an excuse not to work, even online work, and mooch off me. We lived with his mother who was supporting his narrative that he is too sick to work. X was abusive, first only verbally but it progressed to physical abuse. I omitted most of this information in the first post because I wanted an unbiased opinion whether to take the cat or not. Even though the cheating was the last nail in the coffin of our relationship, I was actually contemplating leaving him for almost a year before the actual fact and on occasions where he ramped up the abuse. I will withhold giving examples for the time being because the topic might be traumatic for some readers. My last update ended with my ex coming to work to offer me pixel money for my cat. This was in August 2022. I vacated his flat at the end of July. I thought everything was said and done and I would not hear from him again. Spoiler, I was wrong. Since the breakup he has messaged me about every 3 months on Discord for various bullshit, like how he lost his best friend or asking for photos of the cat. I didn't block him there in case either of us needed to exchange items we forgot at our respective places. Sometime in March I found out by chance that he's still using my old League account. He has been banned on 3 different accounts for toxicity. I gave him the password while we were dating, but I did not think he would have the audacity to continue using it after we broke up. The kicker is, all it would take would be to ask me to use it and I would have no problems with it. It really rubbed me the wrong way that he could message me with his woe is me crap on 4 different occasions but conveniently forgot to mention that he is still playing on my account. I wondered for about a week whether to let it slide or to just change the password, then he contacted me again about wanting to ask me something. I shot this down and reminded him that I explicitly told him not to contact me. He said okay. This lasted for a fortnight until he messaged me again, saying that he will ask his question regardless. I pointed out how I told him not to contact me and he could not respect even that. So he has learned nothing, as he still does not give a fuck about other people's boundaries. The question was, what did it feel like to be with a complete monster for 7 years? Why did you stay for so long? Apparently the lad was going through some kind of epiphany phase. There were a lot of crocodile tear-laced explanations that followed. The gist of it was that he was doing some reflections. He realized he is a complete lunatic and needs help, and apologized for how he behaved. I also found out that he spent all his savings and disability money, including the crypto he offered me for the cat. So he could not take me up on the offer to buy my LOL account. Sag. Also, to nobody's surprise, his little affair did not work out. I did not ask for details, but what he said was, "I think I finally met a person who is more sick and broken inside than me," which is quite an achievement. Few months prior to this revelation, a WoW friend from the side chick's country messaged me. For context, we are all Europeans and play on the same servers. Friend knew my side of the story, and when he found out that side chick is flying to my and ex's country, he put 2 and 2 together. He told me he does not expect much from their relationship, since a year ago the chick was dating a mate of his, broke his heart and flew somewhere else for the next WoW guy that gave her attention. Knowing these facts, and after what my ex said, I mentioned to him how it was ironic that he cried cheating if I was 5 minutes late after work, but decided to involve himself with a woman who was practicing cheating as a sport. He agreed that it was quite ironic indeed, and that he had to lay in the bed that he made, which was sort of mature on his part, I suppose. Also, did I mention he was too dumb to wire his own debit card to his WoW account? This is why he could not play anymore. Well, yeah, but I guess also because he lost his sugar mommy that was paying for it and failed to secure another. As for me, Kitty and I are thriving. I am active. I lost 12 kilograms since the breakup, and I'm getting back in shape, even though I lost the excess weight the moment I dumped the ex. I have reconnected with most of my friends and apologized for not contacting them very much in the past 7 years, and explained why. They were very understanding, and things have gone very much to how they were before. I have also met the most decent, kind, and compassionate man out there. So, life is looking good. Thank you for all the support, Reddit. Thank you for reading, and have a great day. I was sick to my stomach when I discovered my wife's secret Google account, which contained hundreds of photos of my ex-girlfriend. I, 36, met my wife Bailey, 33, 9 years ago through mutual co-workers, and we hit it off immediately. I fell absolutely head over heels with this woman. She was everything I was looking for. I had gotten out of a toxic, dare I say abusive long-term relationship right before that with a woman Bailey had been acquainted with, but not friends with. I had her blocked on everything and had no contact with her since breaking up. We got married right after the tail end of the pandemic, bought our first house together, and started trying to conceive. That was difficult because Bailey has PCOS, but last year she finally gave birth to our first daughter. I'm having a blast being a dad. It's kind of a dream come true. I finally got my happy life with my perfect wife. My perfect wife. Until last Monday. My laptop's battery hit the bed, so I opened up Bailey's work tablet with an attached keyboard. You can set it up like a monitor to check on some tax stuff. She wasn't home, it was just me and the baby, but we've never asked permission to use each other's devices. We've always been open like that. There's nothing for us to hide. That's what I thought. When I opened up the internet, I noticed she had the incognito tab open. Never in a million years did I expect to discover what I did. My wife has a secret Google account with a photo album saved called XX. So I clicked on it. Did I discover an affair? Nudes? Nope. In this Google album were over 300 photos, 348 actually, of my ex. The woman I was with right before I met Bailey. The woman who tormented me and made me feel worthless. The album said it was started back right around the time Bailey and I started dating, and was updated as recently as 2 weeks ago. The photos range from candid shots with family, to pictures at her work functions. There were even pictures from her yearbook. I don't know how Bailey could have found her high school yearbook photos. Photos from vacations, Idaho photos from work. Pictures of her in crowds, screenshots of videos and screen recordings of videos. Just her. The other people in the photos would be scribbled out, or the photo would be cropped and zoomed in just on my ex. There were other disturbing things I found too. There was another album with just zoomed up pictures of my ex's hair. Come to think of it, Bailey had recently started wearing her hair different, and my ex had a very identifiable hair type. There was another album with screenshots of comments on social media. Of course I can't find them because I have her blocked. Like, Facebook group she's in and public posts. And my ex is very low-key on social media. I can't imagine the lengths Bailey went to find them. My ex literally lives in another country now. There were also different links to the exact outfits she was wearing. Like am I the asshole for telling my best friend I don't want to hear about her shitty boyfriend anymore? Hi Reddit, I am feeling really bad about this and need advice. I, 23, have been friends with my BFF Kayla since we were 11. She is awesome and has supported me through some really tough times, and I have been there for her through a lot of shit too. We have never fallen out, and we always supported each other. Until now. Kayla has been with her boyfriend James for just over 2 years now. I liked him at first. He was good for her. He made her happy, so I was happy. But for the last year or so, every time I have seen or chatted to Kayla, all she has done is complain about him. Some of the stuff she has told me about him is super gross, and I have lost all respect for him, and in turn, I have started losing respect for her. She has also changed a lot since being with him. She used to want to travel the world, explore and experience new things. Now she never leaves her house and wants to be a stay-at-home mother by the time she's 25. It makes me sad to see. She has lost her sparkle. It all came to a head when we went for dinner for my birthday. She spent the whole night complaining about James, as always, telling me way too much personal stuff about him, as always, and just generally moaning. It was after we had finished our meal when I finally snapped and said I don't want to hear any more about her shitty boyfriend, because everything I advise her to do she just ignores and I have nothing left to say to her. I told her she should dump him if she hates him so much, and if she isn't going to dump him then to quit bitching about him all the time because I didn't want to hear it anymore. I had had quite a few glasses of wine and was just feeling super bummed because she made my whole birthday dinner about her and her stupid boyfriend. This was 5 days ago and she hasn't spoken to me since. I messaged her the next morning apologizing and asked her if we could meet up to talk about it, but she hasn't responded. Relevant comments. To a longer YTA comment. OP, thank you for your comment. I do actually agree with you after reflecting. I haven't ever told her that I'm tired of her not taking my advice, and I have never asked her to not complain about him. This was the first time I had challenged her. I have always been very patient with her, and let her complain as much as she wants. This has left me feeling emotionally drained after every time I see her. I should have set boundaries in a calm and mature manner, when I was sober. I was just so annoyed that she made me an entire birthday meal about her relationship issues. I had also just found out that I had got my dream job, and wanted her to be happy for me. I took out my frustration on her and I spoke to her poorly. Thank you. I am going to try and fix it with her top commenter. I mean, you took the nuclear option and drunkenly exploded on her rather than having a civil conversation about how the constant complaining was impacting you and your friendship. Of course she's hurt and pissed off. Not to say she's free and clear of taking over your birthday, but she may honestly have no idea how much she complains or how draining it can be for others. The fact that you have lost respect for her means maybe it's time for the friendship to end. If you don't like her and you don't like being around her, what's the point of the relationship? Don't expect her to forgive you for handling the situation like you did instead of like a real friend would though. Alcohol ultimately didn't make you do this. OP, alcohol didn't make me do this. I did it because I didn't communicate sooner, and I had a lot of pent-up anger. I shouldn't have spoken to her like that and I am going to apologize. Commenter, downvoted. You are the asshole. Get off booze and other drugs. OP, I accept I'm the asshole, but if I want to have a few glasses of wine on my birthday, that is my prerogative. I don't do drugs, and I am over the legal drinking age. I had 3 glasses of wine on my birthday. Commenter, NTA, the best thing you can do is let her be right now. When she's ready to talk, she will reach out to you. OP, I'm worried that if I let her be, she will never reach out and I will lose her as a friend. I don't want to lose her, despite her frustrating me with constantly talking about her boyfriend. She's a good person. I was thinking of writing her a letter to apologize and explain how I feel. IDK. Commenter, a letter may be a good idea, especially if she has blocked you on social media or is avoiding your messages. Do you have any mutual friends willing to tell Kayla how you feel? OP? She hasn't blocked me, but she has already ignored one message, so I feel like she would just keep ignoring me. All of our mutual friends have dropped her because they can't deal with her complaining. They're all telling me to unfriend her, but I'm not ready to do that. Commenter. Is the relationship just bad, or is it abusive? Not acting like her usual self, her spark is gone. Those are red flags. If it is an abusive relationship, and emotional abuse very much is abuse, then make sure to leave the door open for her to contact you when she's ready to leave. Abusers isolate and control their victims, and cutting off friends and family is part of the goal. If the support system is gone, it's harder to leave. So tell her that you will always be there for her if she decides to leave him. That does not mean you have to keep listening to her. Tell her that you are done hearing about this guy and set whatever boundaries you need. But tell her that when she is ready to leave him, you are there for her. OP, it isn't abusive. If anything, she's not very nice to him. She doesn't like the guy. I don't know why she stays with him. She struggles with her mental health, and he is a very lazy guy, so encourages her to stay in bed all day. He isn't what she needs, but he isn't abusive. Who paid for dinner? OP, I paid. It did need to be said, but not in the way it was. I want to apologize for the way I say it, not for how I feel. Commenter. So let me get this straight. Your best friend of 12 years goes to your birthday dinner empty-handed and you pay for it. She spends the whole night making it about herself and her stupid BF, and it got you to the point of yelling at her, rightfully so, and now she's giving you the cold shoulder. This girl is not your friend, she's a user. This is not a friendship worth having. IDC what financial situation is, if it's your BFF birthday, you make it work. It's not about money, it's about effort. If she truly couldn't afford to go out, then she could have made you dinner and a birthday cake and bought a $2 bottle of wine. OP, yeah, I guess that's true. I told her not to get me anything because she's broke. I wasn't expecting anything, but I was expecting her to at least ask me how I am, instead of just talking about her boyfriend. IDK Update 1. Edit. Thank you all for your comments. I can see you're all very divided about if I'm the asshole or not, and I get why. I have accepted that I am the asshole for going nuclear when drunk, and I know I should have spoken to her in a mature and calm manner way earlier than I did. She shouldn't have ruined my birthday dinner, but she is struggling. She didn't deserve to be spoken to like that. I have decided to write her a letter apologizing for the way I spoke to her. I am going to write, very nicely, that I still stand by what I said and that I love her, but hearing her complain repeatedly about the same issue without taking advice is very draining. I'm going to tell her I want to still be friends and that I don't want this to ruin our friendship. I will also recommend she goes back to therapy. She had a therapist in high school but ghosted her. If she then reads my letter and decides to end the friendship, then that is up to her. I will be sad, but everything happens for a reason. Right. Update 2. Firstly, thank you so much for everyone who commented and messaged me. Nice or not, it was great to get everyone's opinion. So I wrote Kayla a letter, like I said I was going to in my edit. It felt very formal and weird to do, but for some reason doing it over text felt wrong. I wanted her to know I'm sincere. I said that I love her, and I value our friendship extensively, and apologized for the way I spoke to her. I said alcohol wasn't to blame. I was. I spoke to her like an asshole and she didn't deserve it. I wrote that I have felt frustrated about the situation for a long time now, because it upset me seeing her so frustrated and upset all the time with the person who is supposed to cherish and respect her the most. I told her that I wholeheartedly believe that she should end the relationship. I said I knew this wasn't my place to say, and that she didn't need to take my advice, and that I would support her in whatever decision